Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 4 real cases where cemetery workers quit after one night, we're stepping past the gates into the job no one really wants when the sun goes down. These aren't legends told around a campfire. These are the stories from the people who were paid to watch the dead and left after a single shift, refusing to ever go back. These accounts come from real workers, real cemeteries, and real nights where something in the dark made them hand in their keys by sunrise. Groundskeepers who heard footsteps on empty gravel. Night watchmen who saw lights in sealed mausoleums. New hires who lasted exactly 1 graveyard shift before walking off the job and never speaking about it again. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers wander in, listen, and vanish into the dark without subscribing. Don't be one of them. If you want more true stories pulled from the edges of the night, join the darkness. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a cemetery in your town that gives you a bad feeling, one you avoid after dark, type its name below. Because when the last worker clocks out, the lights go off, and the gates are locked, something out there is still on duty. Kill the lights. Silence the world. Take a slow breath and let us begin. My name's Ethan Cole. I'm from a little place outside Marion in Indiana that most people only know because of the outlet mall on the highway. And I work as a grounds maintenance guy for the county, cutting grass, fixing fences, whatever they send me to, and I need to get this out of my head because I only took 1 night shift at the cemetery and I will not ever go back there. I do not care what they pay. Listen, I know how it sounds, man. I know how it sounds when someone starts a story with a graveyard, but this did not feel like a story when it happened. It felt like a normal, cheap day that slid sideways when I was not ready for it. And I keep seeing it every time I close my eyes, so I am talking into my phone at 3 in the morning by that same gate right now with my engine off and my hands still shaking, hoping if I say it all, it will stop replaying, or at least it will not be just mine anymore. The day started like any other long day, nothing special. I woke up around 9 because I had the afternoon shift at the parks department, and the first thing I remember is how cold my bedroom floor was when my feet hit it, that shock that makes you draw your breath in fast. The window had that thin fog on the inside because the seal is bad. I checked my phone, 9, 7, 3 notifications about bills, and 1 from the weather app telling me it was going to be clear and cold. I went to the kitchen and had the same breakfast I always have because it is fast and cheap. 2 slices of white bread in the toaster, peanut butter spread so thick it rips the bread if you are not careful, instant coffee in a chipped mug with the logo worn off. I ate standing up at the counter, scrolling through my messages. My cousin had sent a video of his kid hitting a baseball. My sister had sent a picture of a cat she found under her car. It was that kind of day. Small, boring things. I put on my work clothes, same gray pants with a stain on the right leg from spilled paint, same dark green hoodie with the county logo on the chest, and then over that my high visibility jacket, because they always want us visible on roads. I checked myself in the mirror without really looking. You know, just making sure there was nothing obvious stuck on my face, and I saw this little line of dried dirt on my cheek from the day before, from when we had been clearing drains. I wiped it off with the back of my hand and thought, at least tonight is just sitting in a truck or in a warm office, nothing heavy. At around 11, I clocked in at the main depot like usual, signed my name on the sheet, grabbed my radio and the small tablet they use for job tickets, and one of the guys in the office called me over. His name is Don. Thick glasses, always chewing something. He said, "Cole, we got a call from the city. Cemetery needs a body here all night. Their regular night watch is sick, and the funeral home is nervous about kids messing around with the new grave. "You want the overtime?" And I said yes before I even thought, because the rent is behind and my truck needs new rear tires. And it sounded easy. Sit by a gate, walk around a few times, drink coffee, look at stones. I can handle that. I have done weirder things for less. He printed the work order. It said, Street Matthew Hill Cemetery, night watch, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I knew the place. Everyone does. It is the one you pass on the hill when you come into town from the east. You see the old church with the white steeple and the rows of stones on the slope behind it? And as a kid, I always looked away when we drove past. I do not know why, I just did not like looking at all those little shapes in the ground. Don said, "You had lunch yet?" I shook my head. He said, "Go early, sign in with the grounds guy. He will show you the office. Then you are on your own. Easy money." And he grinned like it was nothing. I killed time until about 4:30, working at the storage yard, sweeping out the shed, coiling hoses, those small jobs they find when there is nothing scheduled. Then I drove home, grabbed some things for the night, a thermos I filled with coffee, a sandwich in a plastic bag, a bag of chips, and an old paperback I have been pretending to read for months. Then I headed out toward the hill. I remember what the light looked like when I pulled onto that road, the sky clear for once, a pale blue turning to that harsh white before it sinks, strips of orange on the horizon over the fields. The kind of evening where the cold waits until the sun is fully gone before it really bites. I got to the cemetery gate at about 5:35. There is a small parking lot at the bottom of the hill next to the church, cracked asphalt with a few spots of oil stains, one of those tall lamps on a pole that hums when it is on. It was off then, just the natural light, and the church door was locked. Nobody around, only one other car, a black sedan near the far end, probably someone visiting a grave before dark, I thought. The office for the grounds is a little brick building tucked between the church and the start of the slope. You would miss it if you did not know. One window, one metal door, an old cross above it that someone had painted brown a long time ago. I went in and met the grounds supervisor, a tired-looking lady named Janet, wearing a brown jacket and a beanie. She smelled like gasoline and cut grass. She shook my hand and said, "You, Ethan, from the county?" I said yes and showed her my badge. She nodded and said, "Good. I am going home after this. Been here since 6 this morning. We had a funeral up on the north side. All done now. You just have to keep an eye on things. Lock the gate at dusk and do a couple walks through. Make sure no one jumps the fence or decides to have a party among the stones. That is it." She showed me inside the office. Simple, like all of them. Metal desk with a phone, a logbook, an electric kettle on a shelf, a little space heater under the desk, a coffee tin with maybe one scoop left, and on the wall by the window, a panel with 3 screens for the cameras. One pointed at the gate and lot, one at the main path between the stones, and one up on the hill where the new graves are, the picture grainy and a little green, like old video games. She said, "We had a service at 2 up here," and she tapped the top screen. Family insisted on open casket, long sermon, the works. She was a teacher. A lot of people came. They just left about an hour ago. Fresh grave, row H, last on the left. You will see the flowers. People get weird ideas about newly dug graves. So just be visible if you see anyone hanging around too long. All right? I said yes, trying to sound like that was all normal. And she added, "If you hear anything, remember, sound travels funny. Up here, the highway, noise bounces. Kids on the back road. Sometimes you think it is in the graveyard, and it is not. So do not spook yourself, you will be fine." She smiled with just one corner of her mouth, like she had given that speech before. Then she pointed at the heater, said, "This thing rattles, but it works. Do not kick it." And the bathroom light sticks, jiggle the chain, and then she was gone, out the door with her keys, locking the church behind her. leaving me in that small room looking out at the hill full of stones. I signed the logbook, E. Cole, Night Watch 18, clicked the heater on and listened to it hum. Then I sat down and just watched the screens for a bit. The daylight slowly draining away, the person in the black sedan sat a little while longer and then drove off. The lamp in the lot came on with a blink, turning the area yellow, and the camera on the hill showed the flowers at that new grave as little white and red blobs against the darker earth, nothing moving. Around 6:30, I locked the main gate like she said, a heavy chain through the bars, big padlock, the metal cold in my hand. Then I walked the main path up between the older graves just to get a feel for it in the fading light, my breath making little clouds, my boots crunchy on the gravel, the stones leaning in all directions, some so old the names were just faint grooves, some newer, shiny granite with long inscriptions, little angel statues, solar lights that would kick on later. I nodded at them like an idiot, like you do when you walk past people sitting on a porch. Just a habit, I guess. When I got near the top of the hill, I saw the new section, the soil darker where they had disturbed it, one fresh rectangle at the end of a row, covered in flowers, real and fake, wreaths, little notes in plastic sleeves stuck in the ground, and at the head, a small temporary marker, a white plastic stake with a printed card inside, neat black letters with the woman's name and the dates. It said she had been born in 1964 and died this year. So, late 50s. I did the math without meaning to, and I felt that little pinch in my chest when I saw a full life turned into two short numbers and a dash, but it passed. I told myself I was just there to work, not think about it. The section around it was older. I saw stones from the 80s and 90s, a little cluster of them with the same last name, probably a family plot. The ground sloped down gently behind, and beyond the fence there was the back road and then fields, flat and darkening. I walked back down before it got fully dark, because I did not want my first real look around to be in full night. And the cold dug deeper as the sun went. My ears hurt a little if I stayed outside too long, so I was glad for the heater in the office. The first few hours were nothing, pure boredom. I sat in the chair, watched the screens, sipped coffee from my thermos. It was too strong and a little burnt. I ate half my sandwich, scrolled through my phone. Signal up there is not great. So, pages loaded, slow. I texted my sister a picture of the monitor with all the stones under that ghostly light and wrote, "Babysitting the quiet ones tonight." She sent back a laughing face and told me not to scare myself. At around 9, I did another walk, turned off the heater, pocketed my flashlight, went up the path again with the beam low at first, not wanting to blind myself. The sky was clear, cold stars visible, no clouds, no moon yet that I could see, and the air had that tight, clean smell. It gets in winter, like metal. I checked the fence along the back. No gaps, no signs of anyone climbing, nothing but frost starting to gather on the top rail. I passed the new grave, the flowers now dull shapes in the dark, and it felt fine, just sad, like all of them. So I went back down, turned the heater on again, my cheeks prickling as they warmed, and sat. It was around 11. I remember the clock above the desk reading 10:54 when I checked my phone battery. Then, somewhere between 11 and midnight, I started to notice something that did not fit. At first I thought it was the pipes, like she said, or a truck on the back road. A sound so faint I almost ignored it. But the office was quiet, heater low, no TV, my radio on the desk crackling only once in a while, so any small noise stood out. It was like someone crying far away. The way it sounds if someone is in the next house over and their windows are open, soft and broken and uneven. A woman's voice, not a little girl, not an old woman, something in between. I sat very still and listened, and it came in waves. A few seconds of low sobbing, a pause, then a drawn-out breath that shook at the end, then more. And I told myself, okay, Maybe someone is in the church. Maybe a family member has a key. Sometimes they do that. Or maybe someone parked out on the road and the sound is carrying wrong. Like she said, sound travels funny here. I got up, went to the door, opened it a crack. The cold air slid in around my ankles and the sound was clearer outside. Not as faint, it was definitely crying. Not the wind, not an animal. And it was coming from up the hill, not from the road, not from the church. It had that tight, muffled quality, like someone had their face in their hands. My first thought was that family came back. Someone is sitting by her grave, and they are crying, and I am supposed to check on people, maybe offer them space, but also make sure they are safe, not lying out in the cold, not doing anything to themselves. So I grabbed my flashlight, zipped my jacket up to my throat, and started up the path, calling out, "Hello, city grounds? Is someone up here? You all right?" Trying to sound calm and not like my heart had started to pick up a bit. As I walked, the crying stayed ahead of me, not moving side to side, not dodging, just fixed in one place. And the closer I got to the top, the more it sounded like it was right there in the middle of the graves, each breath dragging, each little broken noise landing in my stomach like a stone. The flashlight beam bounced off the stones as I went, making their shadows jump, but there was no one standing between them. No figure, no movement. I came out onto the flatter part near the newer section, turned the beam toward the row with the fresh grave, and my chest got tight because the crying was loud now, clear, the kind where you can tell the person's throat is raw from doing it for a while, and it was coming from, I swear to you, directly from where that new grave was. But there was no one kneeling there, no one sitting on the grass, nothing standing nearby, just the mound of darker soil, the flowers, the white plastic marker catching the light. I stopped a few feet away and turned the light off for a second, just to make sure I was not confusing myself with shadows. And in the dark, it was worse. The lack of visuals made the sound sharper. It was right there, at my feet, almost. This woman sobbing quietly, saying something under it that I could not catch. Little broken words. And my skin prickled from the back of my neck down my arms, every little hair standing up. I turned the light on again, scanned all around, behind the grave, down the slope, among the older stones, even toward the fence. Nothing. The place looked empty, but the crying did not change. It did not get louder or softer when I moved the beam. It did not shift direction. It just kept spilling up from the same spot. I tried to be reasonable. I really did. I told myself, maybe someone left a little playing device there. Maybe a phone with a recording. Teenagers can be cruel or stupid. Or maybe there is a speaker buried as some awful prank. I do not know. So I stepped closer, slowly, until I was right at the foot of the grave, looking at the mound from the bottom. And the sound was so clear then that it hurt. You could hear her breath scrape. You could hear the wetness in it. I swallowed and said, "Ma'am, are you here? I am with the city. Are you all right? Can you talk to me?" I felt crazy talking to dirt, but what else do you do? That was where the sound came from. The crying hitched once and for a second. I thought she had heard me, but then it went right on. Same pattern, like my voice had not mattered at all, and I realized then that there was no change in volume when I leaned down. Like the sound had no distance, no real position in the air. It was just there, pressed up against my ears, no matter where I stood. I reached out slowly and put my hand on the soil, just the tips of my fingers at first, expecting to feel nothing but cold. And it was cold, colder than the air, a deep kind of cold that sank into my skin at once. And the second my fingers touched it, the crying changed. The sound shifted from muffled to a tiny bit clearer, like a layer had been peeled off. And under it, finally, I heard words, not full sentences, just short pieces. "Please, and I am here, and it is dark, and can anyone hear me?" repeated in between sobs. I jerked my hand back so fast my shoulder hurt. My flashlight beam swung wild and lit up stones on the far side. My heart was beating so hard I could see my jacket moving with it, and I said out loud, "No, you are scaring yourself. There is some kind of speaker, there is a prank, there is some rational thing." I said it like that, like I could bully myself into calm. I forced myself to back away, step by step, until the crying grew fainter. Not because it was moving, but because I was like walking away from a radio, and when I got back to the path, it was just a thin thread of sound. Still there, but easier to ignore if I tried hard. That was the only way I made it back down to the office. I told myself I was going to call someone. I did not care if I sounded crazy. I needed another human voice on this. In the office, the heater hummed, the clock ticked, the cameras showed their empty green pictures, and through all of it, faint but steady, I could still hear that crying like it had sunk into my skull now. I grabbed the phone and called the number written in big letters on the board, Janet, home. I heard it ring 4 times and then go to voicemail and her recorded voice telling me to leave a message. I hung up without speaking. Then I dialed the on-call number for the county. It is an answering service. A guy picked up. I told him I needed to talk to a supervisor about something happening at the cemetery. He said they would pass the message. I asked how long. He said he did not know. I felt anger push against the fear for a moment, but it did not help. I set the phone down and grabbed my radio, thinking maybe I could raise a patrol car. We share channels sometimes. But all I got was static. The same static it always has when no one is close. I was alone. I sat back down, my legs suddenly weak, and tried to do what Janet had said. I told myself, sound carries weird. Maybe there was someone beyond the fence. Maybe a house I could not see in the dark. But every time I closed my eyes and tried to imagine that, all I could picture was that rectangle of disturbed earth and the way the sound had sharpened when I touched it. I watched the clock, the red second hand jerking around, 11:32, 11:40, 11:51. The crying never fully stopped. It would dip and then swell like waves, and then, sometime after midnight, it changed. There was a dull sound under it, now a second rhythm. Soft at first, I thought it was maybe a branch tapping the church wall in the wind, but there was no wind. The tree outside the window was still, so I listened harder and realized it was slower than that, heavy and spaced, a kind of hollow thump that repeated every few seconds like someone knocking on thick wood. The timing of it was wrong for any machine, not fast and regular like a pump or something. It was too human. Knock, pause, sometimes 2 in a row, then a longer gap, and over it, the same broken crying and those little words, "Please, and I am not gone," and "Why cannot anyone hear me?" I felt my throat close up because there is only one place wood like that would be under that soil, and my mind did not want to go there. It fought it. It threw up every other picture it could, but the sound cut through all of that. I stood up again. I do not even remember deciding. The chair scraped back. I grabbed the flashlight and went out. The night hit me like a hand on the chest, colder than before. The lamp in the lot buzzing, that hard white light, my breath thick. But the sound up the hill was louder now. It did not wait for me to open the door to start. It had already filled the space, and walking toward it was like walking into a room where someone is panicking. Your body tightens in advance. I went up the path faster this time, not bothering to call out, my boots slipping a little on the frost, my heart going too fast, and when I rounded the last bend and the new grave came into view, the sound hit me at full strength. There was no mistaking anything now. It was a woman crying and someone knocking, and those two things were coming out of the ground, not from a speaker, not from a house, from that one place. In the beam of my light, I could see the mound was different. The neatness was gone. The top layer was uneven. Some of the flowers were knocked aside, stems broken, one of the wreaths half slid down, leaves pressed into the soil, like something had shifted under them. And I swear to you, as I watched, the earth moved just a little, like something underneath had pushed up and then fallen back. A shallow, almost breathing motion. Once, twice, I told myself, you are not leaving this alone. If there is the slightest chance, any chance at all, that someone is in there alive, you do not stand around waiting for permission. You act, you deal with fallout later. That thought was the only thing that kept my feet from locking. I dropped to my knees at the foot of the grave again without thinking, my pants soaking through at once from the wet grass, and put both hands flat on the soil, not just my fingertips, my whole palms. Pressing down, I could feel it, the way something underneath responded with that faint upward push, like someone tried weakly to press back, and the knocking got louder in my bones, each hollow thump vibrating up through my arms, and the voice was clear now, as clear as if a person was lying right under a thin mattress instead of 6 feet of earth and wood. She was saying, "Is someone there? Please, please. I am not supposed to be here. I cannot see. It is so small. Please hear me." Over and over with different little changes. I woke up. Is it still the church? Where is my sister? Why is it dark? Hello? Hello? And there was nothing I could say that meant anything. The words clumped in my mouth. I finally managed, "I hear you. I hear you. I am here. I am here. I am going to get help. I promise. Just hold on. Do not give up." And my voice cracked on that last part because it sounded pathetic even to me, like something a child would say. She answered, just once, a little rush of relief in the middle of the panic. "You heard me. You can hear me. Thank God. Do not go. Please, please do not leave me alone again." And the word "again" made my stomach twist because it meant she had already spent some time talking into nothing, calling out into silence. And now I was the first to answer. My mind clawed at any practical angle. How long had she been down there? Hours. A day. Was it even possible? I do not know enough about that, about embalming and all. My head felt too small for all the questions. But my body was already moving. My hands leaving the soil, the absence of that contact making the sound seem farther away at once, like someone closing a thick door, and I stumbled back a step, my knees numb, and said, "I am coming back. I am getting someone. I am not leaving you. I swear to God, I will bring help." Even though I did not know who or how or what they would do, I had to say something. She knocked 3 times, fast, like she was trying to grab me, and whispered, "Do not leave. Do not leave. It is getting tight." Her breath hitching, but if I stayed there, alone, with only my bare hands against wet soil, I was going to break into pieces. So I forced myself up and ran. I ran down that path like a kid being chased, the cold slapping my lungs, the flashlight beam jerking, catching stone after stone in brief flashes, and the crying and the knocking followed me part of the way, then thinned, then became just a memory echoing in my ears. But the words did not, they stuck, every please scratching my nerves raw. In the office, I slammed the door harder than I meant to, the little room shaking, the heater clanking, my hands shaking so badly I had trouble grabbing the phone. I dialed the on-call number again, voice too high, almost shouting when the answering service picked up, "You need to get someone here now. I am at Street Matthew Hill. There is something wrong with the new grave. I can hear someone. I know how it sounds, but you send someone. Police, fire, anyone, right now." I did not care how insane it sounded, and the operator, to his credit, did not laugh. His voice went flat and professional. "You are saying you believe someone is alive in a grave?" I said yes. Yes. I was sure. I could hear her. I could feel the knocking. He said he would patch through to emergency dispatch to stay on the line, do not leave, and then a new voice came on. A woman this time, calm, asking me to repeat, to give the address, the details, when the burial was, if there had been a funeral, all of that, and I answered as best as I could, my heart pounding. I could still hear faint sobbing through the wall, like the sound did not care about doors. The dispatcher said, "We are sending a unit to you. Stay put. Do not attempt to disturb the grave. Do not do anything on your own. Do you understand, sir?" I said yes, I understood. Even though my whole body was screaming to go back up there and start digging with my bare hands, stone by stone, if I had to, but some tiny rational part of me knew that if I damaged that area without others present, it would only make things worse. If there was a chance, they had to do it right, with tools, fast. Waiting those minutes was the worst part, and I do not even know how many there were. I kept looking from the clock, to the door, to the screens and back, my leg bouncing, the heater sounding like it was breathing too loud, the crying coming and going in thin lines that made it hard to tell if it was in the air or in my head now. Every time it dipped, I thought, that is it. That is the last of it. And then it would come back, weaker, like someone calling from farther down a tunnel. At one point, maybe 10 minutes in, I realized something that made my skin go cold. Under the crying and the knocking, there was now a new sound, very faint, like the plastic rustling you hear when someone opens a bag in another room, but if I focused, I could pick out a pattern, a faint, shrill beeping, irregular at first, then settling into that steady medical rhythm you hear on hospital shows, that tiny, high note repeating, and for a moment I thought it was the heater or the radio. I even turned the heater off, held the radio to my ear, but it was not them. It was coming from no visible source, synced in my mind with the picture of a monitor that should not be under the hill, and that felt worse than anything, like two places had overlapped. I heard sirens in the distance before I saw any lights. That high, rising sound that usually means trouble somewhere else. Not for you, but this time it was for me. For her, they got closer, then cut off, and a minute later, red and blue flashed through the window, painting the office walls. I ran out before they could knock. 2 police cars by the gate, a third vehicle behind them, the fire department SUV. You could tell by the gear in the back, a couple of neighbors had gathered at the bottom of the driveway in jackets over pajamas, drawn by the siren and the lights, faces pale in the cold. An officer stepped toward me, big guy, breath clouding, asked if I was the caller. I said yes. He asked me quick questions right there. Name, job, what exactly I heard. I answered, my words tumbling over each other. I could see the doubt creep into his eyes with each sentence, but his partner was already talking into the radio, saying they were on scene at a possible entrapment, burial, something like that. I heard words like unlikely, but checking. The fire supervisor came over, dark coat with reflective stripes, carrying a big flashlight. He asked where the grave was. I pointed up the hill, my hand shaking. He turned to his crew, told 2 guys to grab shovels and bars, told the others to stand by. Then he said to me, quiet, you sure about this? Son, we do not play around with graves. We are going to have a lot of explaining to do. If we start digging and there is nothing, you understand? And I said, I did. But I heard her. I felt the knocking. I could not explain it, but I was not making it up. He held my gaze a second longer and then nodded once, like he had made a decision, and said, all right, show us. We went up the path as a group. Me, 2 officers, the fire guy, 2 firefighters with tools, their boots heavy on the gravel, their breath loud, our lights making wide swaths on the stones. The neighbors stayed by the gate, whispering. I heard one of them say, is someone buried wrong? Like it was a rumor jumping ahead already. As we climbed, I listened hard for the crying, the knocks, the beeping, anything. But the hill was silent now, except for our steps and the far hum of the highway. Nothing odd, nothing out of place, just the normal night quiet, and with each step, that silence pressed harder on my chest, making me feel smaller, stupid, exposed. When we reached the row with the new grave, they all saw at once that something had happened there. Even in the harsh beams of the flashlights, the disturbed soil, the scattered flowers, the plastic wreath half buried, it looked wrong compared to the neat mounds around it. And I saw the supervisor's jaw tighten. One of the officers whistled low under his breath and said, "Somebody has been messing with this," but not in a joking way. We stood around it in a loose circle, everyone quiet for a moment, waiting for some sound, some cry, some knock, and there was nothing, just our breathing. I stepped closer than the others. I think because I wanted them to hear something, anything, to prove I had not dragged them out for shadows. I said, "Lo, can you hear her? Do you hear anything?" And they all listened, heads tilted slightly, like when you try to pick up a faint radio, but their faces stayed blank, no reaction. The fire supervisor crouched at the head of the grave, ran his gloved hand over the soil, picked up a crushed flower, looked at it like it might answer something. Then he turned to the plastic marker, reached for it with his other hand, and froze for a second, his hand stopping just short, and my stomach sank, because I knew that look now, the same one I had seen on Janet when she talked about funny sounds, the look of someone running into a detail they did not expect and did not want. "What?" I asked, my voice small. "What is it?" He did not answer right away. Then he picked up the marker and held it closer to his light. The officers leaned in. I stepped around the side to see, my heart thudding in my throat. The printed card, the one with her name and dates, was there, but the ink was smeared across the plastic, like water or fingers had dragged through it. The letters blurred into a gray wash, unreadable, and above that, carved directly into the plastic with something sharp, deep enough to catch dirt in the grooves, was a new name, not hers, mine. Ethan Cole, in ugly, uneven letters. The N slanted, the E scratched twice, like someone had gone over it again. The L too high, but clear as anything. My first and last name, written where hers should be. For a second, everything narrowed down to that little piece of plastic, the world shrinking until nothing existed but those letters. Like someone had taken a knife to my own chest patch and pasted it there, and my legs went weak. I had to steady myself with the flashlight hand on a nearby stone. I heard someone swear under his breath. "I will not repeat it," one of the officers said. That's some kind of joke, but his voice did not sound like he thought it was funny. The fire supervisor looked up at me, his eyes searching my face, and asked, "Slow, did you do this, son?" And I shook my head so hard my teeth clicked. No, I had not. I had seen her name there earlier. I had read it. I told them what it had been, first and last. I spelled it out. I told them the year she was born, the year she died. I remembered it clear as day, and I watched them as they realized I was not guessing. I had actually seen it. The officer pulled out a little notebook, checked his own notes from the call sheet, saw that the name I gave matched the one in his log from the funeral detail earlier that day, and his face changed just a little, the suspicion slipping into something more uneasy. "Could someone have carved this between the funeral and now?" the other officer asked, like he needed any other explanation. And they all looked at the ground around the grave. The frost, the soft dirt, the lack of extra footprints except ours, the clean fence line, and you could see them do the math and come up short. We all went quiet again, and that was when it happened. The last thing. The thing that really stuck in my head and will not leave. A single knock came from under the soil. Just one. Sharp, hollow, like knuckles on a wooden lid. Loud enough that there was no chance I imagined it. Not like before when I was alone. This was clear, and all of us heard it at the same time. You could see it hit them, the way their shoulders jerked, the way their eyes widened. The way one of the firefighters actually took a step back, like something might burst out. Nobody said anything for a second. We all just stared at the mound, light steady on it, and in that second, the knock did not repeat. The crying did not come back. There was only the echo of what we had all heard in our own heads. The fire supervisor recovered first, his training pulling him forward. He snapped orders. Shovels here, now, dig down slow, careful, officer, get the coroner on the line, get whoever signed off on that death here, move. And for a moment, hope flared so bright in my chest, it hurt. Because if they were digging, if they were going to open it, there was still a chance, a tiny, impossible chance that she was in there alive and they could get her out, that this could be something we fixed instead of just something that haunted me. The firefighters started to dig, throwing shovels of earth aside in a rhythm. The sound of metal on dirt sharp in the cold air. The officers spoke into their radios, words I did not track, my heart pounding, my hands twisting the flashlight, and I stood back, out of the way, watching, counting every scoop, and silently begging them to go faster. Please, please, do not stop, do not slow down. But they did, not because they wanted to, but because the ground stopped giving. After only a couple of feet, the shovels hit something hard. Not the casket itself, but the outer vault, concrete. They had to clear around it, chip at it. It took time. More people came up from the bottom. The coroner finally arrived, red-faced from the climb, angry at being out there in the middle of the night, arguing with the officers in a low voice about procedures, about getting a court order, about liability, all of that, words that sounded thick and useless in the air over that mound of disturbed earth. The fire supervisor argued back, pointing at the marker, at me, at the ground, saying, "We have potential live entombment." Those were his words. I remember them because they made my skin crawl. And the coroner shook his head, said she had been embalmed, certified. There was no way. He had signed papers. He had been there at the service. He had seen his mouth saying no, while his eyes kept sliding to the soil like he did not completely believe himself. They argued right there, over her, over me, over that one knock. And while they did, the night kept moving, the cold went deeper, the hope that had spiked in me started to sag under the weight of their rules. In the end, they did not open the vault that night. I watched the decision happen in real time, the way they all looked at one another, the way liability and procedure and fear of being wrong stacked up higher than whatever chance there might have been under that hill. They took more photos. They measured footprints. They collected the marker with my name carved into it and slipped it into an evidence bag, and they left the rest for morning. "We will have the funeral home and the family here first thing," the coroner said. "We will review everything. If there is cause, we will get an order, we will check, but we are not tearing up a grave in the dark on a call like this. Not without more." He patted my shoulder once, a gesture I could not read. Sympathy, annoyance, I do not know, and walked away, down the path, leaving the fire crew to cover what they had disturbed as best they could. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to grab their jackets and shake them and ask them how many knocks, how many cries, how many names carved where they do not belong. Does it take before they act? But the words stuck in my throat. I just stood there, empty, while they finished up. When we went back down, the officers took my statement in the office, wrote everything I said down. Every time I mentioned the crying and the words and the knocking, they looked at me like they wanted to believe and were scared of what it meant if they did. I signed the paper, my hand unsteady. They told me they would be in touch if they needed more, told me not to talk to the press if anyone asked, which made me laugh once, short and bitter, because who would care about what I heard? They let me leave at around 4:30. Another guy from the department came to sit there until morning, someone who had not heard anything, who did not have my picture of the grave in his head, someone who could probably just watch the screens and drink coffee. I drove home on streets that felt wrong, too straight, too quiet. Every time I passed a little town church with a few stones behind it, my hands tightened on the wheel, my eyes refused to look left or right. I kept them glued to the road and the fat lines of paint. Like if I saw another grave at that moment, I would throw up. I did not sleep when I got home. I lay on my bed in my work clothes, staring at the crack in the ceiling, watching it grow and shrink as my breathing changed. And every time my eyes closed for more than a second, I was back on that hill, hands in cold soil, listening to someone beg me not to leave. The next day, no one called, not the police, not the fire department, not the coroner, nothing. By late afternoon, I could not take it. I drove up there again, parked on the road this time, instead of going in, just looked from a distance. The gate was open, a couple of cars in the lot, nothing obvious happening. A man walking his dog down the sidewalk like it was any other day. I tried to tell myself that was a good sign. That if something big had happened, the street would be full of vans and reporters, but that did not calm me. It made me feel like the whole thing had been swallowed, smoothed over. I checked the local news on my phone every hour that evening. Nothing, no story about a grave being opened, no scandal, no investigation into a living person being buried by mistake. Nothing about that woman at all. Just her obituary from a week before, the same nice words about how she had loved her students and baked at holidays. Like the last line of her story had stayed exactly where everyone put it, no matter what I had heard on that hill. The next week at work, no one mentioned it either. Don just said, "You are off nights for a bit, back to day shift," like it was nothing. Maybe they had got a call, maybe not. Maybe the file is sitting somewhere in a drawer with a note that says unsubstantiated in red ink. I do not know. They did not tell me. They did not owe me that. I guess I was just the guy who heard something. So now it is like this. I cannot look at my own name the same way. Every time I see it on my badge or on a form, I picture it scratched into that cheap plastic hanging over someone else's body, and I feel sick. I cannot drive past street Matthew Hill on the way into town anymore. I add 10 minutes to every route just to go around it. My friends joke, call me dramatic, say I am scared of stones. But they were not on that hill with their hands pressed to the soil. They did not feel that faint push from underneath. They did not hear their own name where it should not have been. The worst part is nights like this, when I wake up sweating at 2 or 3 without knowing why and realize I had been dreaming about knocking. Just that, 3 knocks and a long silence, over and over, and my heart is racing like I have been running. I have to get up, put my shoes on. Sometimes I even get in the truck and drive, like tonight. Back to the gate, park outside, engine off, staring up at the dark slope, knowing she is up there under that mound, whether she died before they put her in or not, and feeling like some part of her is still knocking, but softer now, too soft for anyone to hear, and that part is my fault, because I left when she asked me not to. People say cemeteries are peaceful, that the worst has already happened there, that the dead are at rest, all those phrases. But that night showed me something I cannot unsee, that it is not about ghosts or demons or anything like that. It is about the moment when someone realizes no one is coming, that their voice does not reach where they thought it did. And I was on the other end of that for a little while, close enough to hear the panic in every breath, and then I walked away. I keep telling myself I did what I could. I called, I brought people, I tried, but when I sit here in the dark with my phone light on my hands, I still feel the grain of that cold soil under my palms, like it has marked me, and I know this much now. I will never take another cemetery shift. I will not even walk on the same side of the street as a graveyard if I can help it. Because if there is even the smallest chance that someone down there is still crying, still knocking, I do not trust myself to do anything different, and I cannot live through that sound again. The children in Section D. My name's Corey Mason. I'm from the east side of Haddington, Ohio, just past the rail yard where the tracks split, and I work as the night grounds guy at Fairview Memorial Cemetery, the one off County Line Road, with the crooked white sign and the dented metal trash cans that never stay where you put them. And I need you to understand, I am not the kind of person who makes things up. I fix things. I haul things. I cut grass and change oil and throw my back out moving stone benches for grieving families. That is who I am. And I keep thinking, if I tell this right, if I get every piece of it out of my head, maybe it will feel small enough that I can drive past that place again without turning the radio all the way up. But every time I start talking about Section D, my chest tightens and my hands shake, like I am still holding the flashlight. It was a Thursday. I remember that because Thursday is when they bring the breaded chicken special at the little diner by the highway, and I always swing by before my shift. So that day, I had a styrofoam box on the passenger seat with half a chicken breast, mashed potatoes, and the roll I never eat, and a big plastic cup of sweet tea that sweats all over the cup holder. And I was wearing my gray Fairview polo, the one with the bleach spot near the hem, from when I ruined a pair of my own jeans trying to save an old woman's flowers from weed killer, and my tan work pants that always smell like gas and cut grass no matter how many times my sister runs them through the wash. I clocked in at 5:52 inches the evening because I remember thinking I was early for once. The time stamped on that little green digital display in the maintenance office, and my boss, Mr. Hanley, was sitting at the metal desk with the bad leg, tapping a pen against a stack of papers, and he looked up at me and said, "You see the note I left you, Corey?" And I said, "No, sir, I just walked in." And he pointed with the pen toward the bulletin board where there was a handwritten note pinned under the schedule with a rusty thumbtack. It said in his blocky capital letters, "Teenagers reported in Section D after hours. Extra patrol tonight." And on the line below that, he had underlined "No police" twice and then written "Handle quietly," which is how he is. He hates calling anyone if he can just push work onto us instead. I kind of laughed and said, "Kids, cutting through again?" And he shook his head and said, "No." Neighbor behind the fence said they heard people out there near midnight, laughing, maybe drinking, maybe messing with stones. I want you focusing on D tonight. Take the cart. Stay visible. We do not need another complaint about broken vases. I swear to God, that is how he said it. Like it was some big nuisance that people might be out there where the dead are, not some deep wrong thing. And I just nodded because to me at that point, it was just more walking. Fairview is laid out like someone tried to make a grid and then gave up halfway through. Section A is up near the road, big old stones and the statue of the praying angel with the chipped hand. Then B and C run along the center drive, and Section D is down in the back, low ground, where it always stays a little damp, even in August. The headstones newer and more uniform, because that is where they put people now when they run out of room up front. Behind Section D is a chain link fence, and behind that is a shallow strip of scrubby trees. And behind that are backyards of a couple of cheap ranch houses, the kind with above ground pools and plastic play sets that have lost their color. The teenagers everyone complains about cut through from those houses, hop the fence, and cross the cemetery to get to the road without walking the long way around to the corner. We have caught them a few times. Usually it is just kids in hoodies with cheap flashlights, cigarette smell, laughing too loud, and acting like we are ruining their lives when we tell them to leave. That is what I had in my head. I was not thinking about anything strange. I ate my chicken in the maintenance shed, sitting on the old rolling chair, scrolling through my phone, and then I grabbed my flashlight, the big metal one we keep by the door, checked the batteries, and pulled on my Fairview jacket, the dark green one with my name stitched over the chest, Corey, in white thread. And I remember noticing there was a grass stain on the left cuff that looked like a thumbprint, and I rubbed at it with my finger and thought I should throw it in the wash Friday. I wish to God that stain had been the only mark that jacket ever had on it. Sunset was around 7 that week, and by the time I finished doing the usual rounds up near the front, picking up old flowers and writing a couple of wind-knocked vases, the sky was in that in-between stage, pink and gray and dim enough that the solar path lights people buy at the garden store were flicking on one by one. The air had that damp chill that smells like wet stone and cut stems. I remember the sound of traffic from the highway dying down on and off, like waves, and a crow sitting up on one of the taller monuments making that harsh noise crows make, over and over like it was stuck. I am telling you all this because none of it felt wrong yet. It was just my job. Section D is at the far end of the little asphalt road that runs through Fairview. You pass the cremation garden with the plaques in the ground and the big rock with peace carved into it. Then you dip down a little slope and there it is, rows and rows of headstones, all similar height, little patches of grass, still trying to fill in between them. Some of the stones have small pictures of the person's face on them, the ceramic ovals, and those always get me if I look too long, so I try not to. We mark the sections with metal posts painted white, with big black letters A, B, C, D. And the one at D leans a little to the left because a truck bumped it years ago and no one ever fixed it right. That night, when I rolled the cart down there, the first thing I noticed, the first wrong detail, was that the Section D sign was straight. It was standing upright, dead straight, like someone had adjusted it. I stopped the cart and looked at it for a second, shining the flashlight on it and then turning the light off and on again, like that would change how it looked. That sign has leaned as long as I have worked there. I have leaned against it on hot days. I have cursed at it when I tripped because my boot caught the base. It has character, you know what I mean. Seeing it straight made this little cold pinch in my gut. But I told myself Hanley probably finally had someone fix it, or maybe I never looked at it from this angle before. You do that to yourself, you explain things right away, so you do not have to feel that first snap of wrong. I parked the cart at the edge of the section, killed the little engine, and sat for a while just listening. It was quiet, not silent though. You could hear cars far off, some dog barking in the neighborhood behind the fence, the wind moving the plastic flowers, so they made this light rattling sound, like distant beads clicking together. After a few minutes, I got out, tugged my jacket around me, and started walking the rows like I always do, boots sinking a little into the soft ground. I checked the fence for any spots kids might be squeezing through, looked for beer cans or cigarette butts. Nothing. Section D looked clean. I did a slow lap, then another, shining my flashlight left and right, trying not to run the beam over names because reading them always feels like you are saying them out loud. The only light besides my flashlight was from a couple of solar lanterns, some family left, a soft bluish glow around 3 stones close to the center of the section. They looked like any others. I noted I should straighten one the next day because it was riding a little low on one side. That was it. I did not see anything that first full pass. Around 9, I went back up to the office to warm up and to write on the log that Section D was clear so far. Hanley had gone home, left me alone like usual. The office has this smell of dust, coffee, and oil that never leaves. There is a little radio on the cabinet we keep turned low, and that night some talk show was on, people arguing about sports. I remember thinking I should change it to music, then not doing it. I poured myself a cup from the bottom of the pot, bitter and burnt, and sat there flipping through the maintenance book for the mower, not really reading. I kept thinking about that straight sign though. It sounds stupid when I say it now, but that thing being different dug at me. Around 10, I pulled on my jacket again and headed back down in the cart. The air felt heavier then, that late kind of damp that gets into your sleeves. On the way down, my headlights caught something on the road, a little pale shape moving. My heart jumped, and then it was just a rabbit, darting off into the grass, tail flicking white. I laughed out loud at myself, said, "Get a grip, man," under my breath, but my laugh sounded wrong in my ears, too loud in that space. I turned off the cart at the same spot as before, near the post for Section D, and again just sat for a minute with my hands on the wheel. The sign was leaning again. I am not kidding. When my headlights swung over it, that white post was back in its old position, tilted to the left the way it always is. I even got out and grabbed it, shook it, and it wobbled. There is a little gap at the base filled with old mud and crushed grass. I know that because I have kicked it out of annoyance 100 times. Seeing it crooked again made my scalp prickle. I stood there next to it, my flashlight hanging loose in my hand, and said out loud, "Okay, I am tired, that is all." Like saying it would make it true. I started walking the rows again, beam low, watching my breath puff out in little clouds. About halfway between the road and the fence, I heard laughter. Not loud, not like drunk teenagers yelling. This was soft, close together, the way little kids laugh when they do something they know they are not supposed to. I froze. Every hair on my arm stood up under the jacket. It was coming from my left, somewhere around the middle of the section, not near the fence where the teens would normally be, but tucked in between the stones. I did not turn the flashlight right away. I do not know why. I just stood there with my head tilted, listening. I swear to God, it sounded like at least 2, maybe 3 kids, maybe 6, 7 years old, that high, breathy kind of giggle. No words at first, just that bubbling sound and the faint patter of movement. But there was no crunch of footsteps on the wet grass, no sound of shoes, just the laugh. Finally, I snapped the beam toward it and said, louder than I meant to, "Hey, you cannot be in here." The beam cut across stone after stone, bright white rectangle on gray. Then it caught motion. There, about 20 feet ahead, between 2 rows, were 3 small figures. Kids. 2 boys and a girl, I think. Though it is hard to really be sure now. They were facing away from me, hunched over like they were looking at something on the ground, shoulders moving in that little bounce kids do when they are trying not to laugh. They were close together, almost shoulder to shoulder, and none of them had jackets on, even though it was cold. The girl, or who I think was the girl, had pigtails tied up with plain white bands. The beam from my light hit them full on, and they did not flinch. They did not turn around or squint or throw their hands up. Nothing. That is the first thing that really punched through my brain, that these kids were standing there in the dark, freezing temperatures, bright light on them, and they acted like nothing changed. "Hey," I called again, trying to sound like the reasonable adult, not the terrified night guy. "You cannot be in here after hours." "Where are your parents?" No answer. They kept that little bent over position, shoulders trembling like the joke was so good they could not stop. I took a step closer. My boots sank a little into the soft ground, and I realized with this weird clarity that I still was not hearing their feet move. Not any shuffling, not even clothes rustling. The grass in D stays damp. Anyone walking there makes noise. You get that wet tearing sound when your boot pulls up. I could hear my own steps clear as day. I could hear plastic flowers moving somewhere behind me. I could hear the wind, nothing from them. I swallowed and said, "Quieter now. Look, this is not funny. You have to come with me up to the office and we will call someone." I lifted the beam a little, trying to see what they were looking at, what they were leaning over, and my light passed over 3 headstones right in front of them. 3 stones in a row, all the same color, low and rounded, with little lamb shapes etched near the top. Child markers. I saw the name on the first one and my stomach flipped. I knew that name. You ever see something and your mind does a double step because it recognizes it before you know why. And for a second, there is this blank terror before the memory snaps into place. It was that. The name was Jacob Mason. My last name, I do not know any Jacob in my family buried there. We do not even use that name. But there it was, clear as day, carved in that clean, sandblasted font. Under it were dates I could not process for a second, because the year of birth was the same year my sister had her second baby, and the year of death was the same year my brother almost rolled his truck. It was like my own life timeline twisted and dropped something in the middle. I blinked hard, moved the light to the next stone. Emma Carlin, the middle name is my sister's. Third stone, Michael Dean. Dean is my father's middle name. All three stones had the same date of death. I took another step, and I swear the air felt thicker, like I was walking into water. I tried to call out again, and my voice stuck in my throat. The kids in front of me, those three small shapes, started to rock a little more, like their silent laughing was getting harder to hold back. The girl's pigtails swung. I finally forced words out. Turn around, right now, and my voice cracked on now so bad it sounded like I was 12. The figures stopped moving. Every bit of motion froze. The laughing, if that is what it was, cut off sharp. The only sound left was the wind and my own breathing. Then, together, like someone gave them a signal, all three of them turned to look at me. I need you to understand. I can take crying kids at funerals. I have carried tiny white caskets. I have seen things that make you sit in your truck afterward and just stare at the steering wheel, but nothing has ever hit me like the way those three turned. There was nothing dramatic about it. They did not spin their heads around fast or anything like that. They just pivoted, slow, in unison, no hesitation, no fidgeting, like they had rehearsed. Their faces were in shadow because my light was still aimed at their chests, but I could see enough that I knew something was wrong. Their clothes were all wrong for the weather, thin shirts and jeans, and they did not look wet or cold, no shivering. Their arms hung perfectly straight at their sides, fingers pointed down, no bend. Kids do not stand still like that. They are always shifting weight, scratching, doing something. I felt my thumb pressing so hard into the flashlight switch that it hurt. You need to come with me, I managed to say. And then one of them, the one in the middle, took a step toward me. No sound. No grass noise. No crunch. The others did the same. One step. The distance between us closed up by a few feet, and suddenly my beam, which should have hit them full on, seemed like it was going through them almost, like the edges of their clothes did not catch the light right. It is hard to explain without sounding like I am back to metaphors, and I promised I would not do that. It was like my eyes could not hold on to the exact outline of them. Stop, I said, but it came out like a whisper. The one in the middle tilted his head just a little to the side, like a curious dog, and I saw his eyes catch a bit of light. They did not reflect like normal eyes. Kids' eyes in the dark will grab any bit of light and throw it back. These looked flat, not empty, not glowing, just flat, like buttons sewn on wrong. Then he smiled. It was a small smile, not wide, not creepy in that movie way. Just the kind of smile a kid gives you when he is about to tell you a secret he should not know. You are late, he said, quiet, clear. His voice sounded like any little boy's voice, but there was something off in the rhythm, like he was reciting a line he had memorized and did not fully understand. My throat went dry. Late for what? I said, my voice louder again, the words shaking. All three of them spoke at once. Late for watching us, they said. Exact same words, exact same timing, like one voice split into three mouths. My knees almost buckled. Something in my brain started screaming that I should run, that I should turn around and walk back to the cart and leave, that Hanley could fire me for all I cared. Instead, I did what we all pretend we would do. I tried to walk toward them, like some part of me still thought I was in control. I took one step forward. The ground under my boot felt wrong, too soft, like there was nothing solid beneath the grass. And my heel sank deeper than it should have. I shifted my weight, heart pounding, and suddenly the smell hit me. Wet earth, cut grass, and something like old water that had been sitting in a vase too long. It made my stomach roll. "Where did you come from?" I asked. And right away I realized it was a stupid question because the answer was obvious. They were standing in front of 3 stones with their names, or at least with names tied to mine, and there were dates carved there I was not ready to think about. The girl lifted one hand, slow, straight, no bend at the wrist, and pointed down at the stone in front of her feet without looking away from me. "From here," she said. Her voice was thinner than the boy's, like it had been stretched. My flashlight flickered then, just once, a little stutter, and I nearly lost it. If that light had gone out completely, I think I would have dropped right there. I smacked the side of it with my palm out of reflex, and the beam steadied. When I looked up again, the 3 of them were closer. They should not have been. I had not seen them move. I had not heard anything. They were just there, 5, 6 feet away from me now. Their faces clear in the light. They looked normal. That is what I cannot get over. No hollow eyes, no gray skin, no movie stuff. They looked like kids you might see at a playground on a spring afternoon. Flushed cheeks, hair a little messy, clothes a little dirty, like they had been playing outside. But their eyes, even though they had color, blue and brown and hazel, did not seem to focus right. They did not blink enough. The boy in the middle had a freckle next to his nose that should have made him look cute. I remember thinking he could have been my nephew's friend. "You are supposed to watch," he said. "That is your job." I swallowed and somehow found a tiny piece of my voice. "My job is to keep people from messing up the stones," I said. "That means you all have to come with me now, okay? We are going up to the office and we are calling your parents." The girl smiled, this tight, wrong smile that did not touch her eyes. "He does not like when we leave," she said. "He? Who?" I snapped, because I needed this to be some stupid prank with a guy in the bushes or something. Anything that made sense. They did not answer. They just kept looking at me, and then, like they had all received some silent cue, they took another step forward in perfect unison. This time, they closed the space completely. They were right in front of me. I could have reached out and touched their shoulders. I did not. My hand was shaking too hard. The smell of wet earth and old flowers was stronger now, almost filling my mouth. "You are watching us now," the boy said, and as he spoke, I felt something cold and damp touch the front of my jacket, near the zipper. It was like a small hand pressing flat against my chest, but there was no weight, no warmth, just that wet chill seeping through the fabric. I gasped and stumbled back, tripping over the uneven ground, my boot catching on the edge of a flat stone. I went down hard on one knee, pain shooting up my leg. The flashlight beam swung wild, scattering light across stone faces, and for a second, I lost them in the dark. The laughter started again, that soft, close-together giggling, but now it was all around me. Left, right, behind. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears. I scrambled to my feet, flashlight sweeping the rows, and there was no one there. Section D was empty, every row, just stones and plastic flowers and that stupid leaning sign in the distance. The air felt lighter all of a sudden, like someone had opened a door. I stood there, turning in circles, beam shaking, whispering, "No, no, no," under my breath, and the only answer was the wind picking up a bit, making the flags on the veteran stones down the hill flutter. I do not remember deciding to move. One second I was frozen in the middle of the section, the next I was half running, half limping back toward the cart, breathing so hard my chest hurt. I did not look back. I did not care if Hanley's precious sign fell over or if teenagers were spray painting the angel up front. I just needed walls, a door, a light that did not rely on batteries. I drove the cart up that little asphalt road so fast the engine whined, my hands locked on the wheel, and when I reached the office, I barely parked it straight, just jumped out and fumbled with the keys. Inside, the fluorescent light felt like salvation for about 3 seconds. Then, I looked down at my jacket. There, on the front, just to the left of my name, were 3 small, muddy handprints. They were low, like a kid had reached up and pressed their hands on me. The fingers were thin. The prints were too perfect. You could see the little separation between each finger. The mud was dark, almost black, and it was wet enough that it had soaked into the fabric a bit. But I had not felt anything except that one cold touch on my chest. I reached up with my own shaking hand and touched the prints. My fingers came away dirty and damp. The smell that came off that mud was the same smell from Section D, that wet earth and old water. I staggered back a step and hit the edge of the desk behind me. My coffee cup tipped, sloshing, but I hardly noticed. "No," I said out loud, voice cracking. "No, I did not. I did not pick anybody up. I did not touch anybody," like I was trying to build a case for myself. I ripped the jacket off, yanking the zipper down so fast it snagged, and threw it on the chair like it was on fire. I stood there in my polo, goosebumps racing up my arms, heart still pounding. The radio in the corner flickered with some commercial about car insurance. Cheerful? Wrong. For a long time, I just stared at that jacket. At one point, I grabbed my phone, intending to call someone. But who do you call for something like that? The police? What would I say? 3 kids who did not step on the grass left handprints on my uniform? My sister? Wake her up so she could hear me fall apart over the phone and picture her own kids every time I said small or laugh? I ended up calling no one. I just stood there, shaking, and then I did something that almost makes me laugh now when I think about how small it was compared to what had just happened. I filled out the log. My handwriting is a mess in that entry. 1038, Section D, no teens observed, area clear. And that is it. You can see where the pen dug into the paper. I wrote a lie while muddy handprints dried 2 feet away from me. I thought maybe if I did the normal things, the world would be normal again. Around 11:15, I heard something at the office door. Not a knock. I know what a knock sounds like. This was a sound like fingers tapping glass, light, and uneven. The door to the office is metal, with a small window at the top, wired glass, and I stared at that window like it might explode. The tapping came again, this time lower, like from the bottom half of the door. I could not make my legs move. "Hanley?" I called, though I knew it was too late for him to be coming back, and he never tapped like that anyway. No answer, just the tap, tap, tap. I moved as quiet as I could to the side of the door, where whoever was on the other side could not see me through the glass, and I reached up and flicked off the lights. The office went dark except for the faint glow from the radio's tiny screen. The tapping continued, and under it, if I strained my ears, I could hear that soft laugh again, multiplied, like it was coming from 3 throats pressed against the metal. "Stop," I whispered, to them or to myself. I am not sure. The tapping stopped. For a full minute, there was nothing. I started to hope it was over, that maybe my brain had just spilled the fear from outside into the sound of branches or something. Then, the doorknob rattled. It was quick, a sharp twist, like a kid trying a handle they are not supposed to touch. The knob turned as far as it could go against the deadbolt and then snapped back. I clapped my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The laughter on the other side of the door tickled at the edge of hearing. Not loud, just enough to make my heart hammer against my ribs. The knob rattled 2 more times, then went still. After that, there was silence again. I do not know how long I stood there in the dark. Time sort of bent. My phone buzzed once in my pocket from a notification, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Eventually, I turned the lights back on, one switch at a time, like that would control something. The room looked the same. The jacket was still on the chair, the handprints now dried and darker. The clock on the wall said 11:58. I decided I was not going back down there. Teenagers could do what they wanted, If Hanley had a problem with it, he could fire me in the morning. I lasted the rest of the shift in that office by keeping the radio up louder and staring at the door, every muscle ready to run that had nowhere to go. When my shift ended at 2, I grabbed my things and, after a moment's hesitation, picked up the jacket. I should have left it there. I know that. But it had my name on it, and I was thinking about money, about how much those uniforms cost, about how mad Hanley would be if I lost one. I told myself I would wash it twice, scrub the stains out, never think about it again. I bunched it up under my arm so I would not have to look at the prints and headed for the door. When I opened it, the cold air hit me and I nearly turned right back around and locked myself in. But the sky had that faint light of very early morning, starting somewhere behind the horizon, not full dawn, just less dark. And I told myself it was fine. The gravel in the parking lot crunched under my boots. Normal, solid. I made it to my truck, an old silver pickup, with a bed full of tools and junk, and threw the jacket into the passenger seat without looking. On the drive home, I could not stop glancing at it, like it was going to move on its own. At one red light, I finally dared a longer look. The handprints were still there, dark against the green, but there was something else. Up near the shoulder, where the fabric had been cleaned before, there was a new smear of mud, like someone had dragged a small hand across it while I was not looking. When I got home, I did not go straight inside. I sat in the driveway with the engine off, the quiet of the neighborhood pressing in, and just stared at my front door, feeling like something was going to be standing in the window if I looked. Eventually, I forced myself out of the truck, grabbed the jacket, and went inside. My house is small, one story, with old carpet and that buzzing sound the fridge makes when it kicks on. I locked the door behind me, checked it twice, then 3 times. I dropped the jacket in the sink in the laundry room and turned on the faucet, scrubbing at the prints with dish soap and hot water like a man possessed. The mud ran off in streaks, swirling down the drain, but the outlines of the handprints did not fade. The fabric itself looked stained, like the dirt had soaked in and become part of the fibers. I scrubbed until my fingers hurt. Then I threw the whole thing into the washer, dumped in way too much detergent, and set it on the hottest setting. While the machine rattled and thumped, I sat on a chair in the kitchen and stared at the laundry room door. When the cycle finished, I took the jacket out, hands shaking again. It was clean in that it smelled like soap now, but the handprints were still there, faint but visible, like shadows pressed into the material. That was the first night. I did not sleep more than an hour, if that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those kids turning in unison, heard their voices in that wrong harmony. When my alarm went off for my next shift, I called Hanley and told him I was sick. He just grunted, told me to feel better, and probably marked it down as a personal day. I sat there with the phone in my hand and stared at the wall, knowing Section D was still there, knowing the next night someone else would do rounds, or maybe no one would, and I felt this heavy guilt mixing with the fear. Late that morning, when the worst of the panic had turned into this dull buzzing in my head, I drove back there. Not for the night shift. I went in the middle of the day. Sun high, harsh light on polished stone, the kind of light that makes everything look too flat. I told myself that if I could see it all in daylight, it would look normal again and my brain would settle. I parked in the main lot instead of back by the maintenance shed and walked in through the front gate like a visitor. The woman in the office, Denise, gave me a surprised look and said, "You are not on till tonight, are you?" And I lied and said, "Just needed to check on some equipment because what else was I going to say?" My boots felt too loud on the pavement as I walked down toward D. The section signs looked ordinary. A, B, C, all in their usual crooked lines. When I reached D, that stupid post was leaning to the left, like always. The ground was still a little damp, but the strong sun had dried the top layer to a crust. I walked straight to the 3 stones I had seen the night before. They were there, in a neat row, lambs etched on top, grass trimmed around them. The names were not what I had seen. My heart dropped. The first stone said, Lucas James Henderson. The second, Bethany Rose Henderson. The third, Caleb Ryan Henderson. Same last name, 3 kids. Same date of death, but none of my family's names anywhere. I stood there with my shadow falling across the stones and read the dates over and over. They had died in a car accident, according to a little line at the bottom of the middle stone, taken from us together in a tragic accident. I felt dizzy. I know what I saw the night before. I saw my own last name, my sister's middle name, my father's. I know how letters look. But here in the light, it was like that version of reality had been erased and replaced with what the records said should be there. I stumbled back and almost bumped into a man standing behind me. I did not hear him approach. He was older, late 50s maybe, in a brown jacket and a ball cap with some local hardware store logo. His eyes were red like he had been crying. "You knew them?" he asked, nodding toward the stones. My mouth went dry. "No, I work here," I said, gesturing vaguely at the grounds. I was checking the section." He nodded, like that made sense. "My grandkids," he said, voice cracking on the word. "We come out once a week, me and my wife. She is up at the office talking to that lady about some paperwork. The kids, they died, in that pileup on Route 6 last year. Whole back seat gone in a blink. I was supposed to pick them up that day, but I got stuck at work. I am always late." He laughed a little, a sad, broken sound. I wonder sometimes if it would have been different if I had been on time. My stomach lurched late. The word hit like a brick. "I am sorry," I said. "Because what else do you say to a man like that?" And he wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. "We asked the grounds crew to keep this section watched," he said. "Kids from the houses back there were sneaking in, leaving trash. My wife hates that, says they have no respect. I keep telling her the staff is doing their best, but she still calls to complain." My ears rang. "Section D," I said, more to myself than to him. "Yeah," he nodded. "D for dead," my wife says. He winced after he said it, like he regretted the joke. "Anyway, thank you for keeping an eye out. It means a lot, knowing someone is watching them." Watching them? The words crawled under my skin. I mumbled something like, "It is no trouble," and walked away before he could say anything else. I did not look back to see if he seemed to recognize me or if he watched where I stepped. I went straight to the office, straight to the file cabinet where we keep the burial records. Denise gave me a weird look when I asked for the map and the index for Section D, but she handed them over. The Henderson kids' names were right there, 3 lines in a row. Section D, row 7, plots 12, 13, 14. There was no Jacob Mason, no Emma Carlin, no Michael Dean. It was like the stones themselves had lied to me the night before, just long enough to drag me into something I did not sign up for. That night, I called off again. Then I quit. I told Hanley I had some family stuff and needed to step away. He grumbled, said he was disappointed that I was one of his only reliable night guys, but he let me go. I thought walking away from Fairview would fix it. It did not. The jacket is in a trash bag in my hall closet now, triple tied. I could not bring myself to throw it in the dumpster because I kept imagining some kid finding it, pulling it out, putting it on, walking around with those prints on their chest, but I cannot keep it somewhere I can see it either. Even through the bag, even in the dark, I know exactly where it is. The handprints did not fade. If anything, they got sharper as the fabric dried. There are 3 on the front, like I told you, and 1 on the back near the shoulder that I did not see until a few days later. Like a kid stood behind me and reached up while I was not paying attention. I cannot prove any of what I am telling you. On paper, it is all normal. A cemetery with a troubled back section, kids that used to sneak in but do not anymore because the fences got reinforced, 3 graves, with 3 names and dates that line up with a news article about a bad wreck on Route 6. My time card says I clocked in at 5:52 and out at 1:59. The log says Section D was clear. If you go there now, in the day, you will see mowed grass and plastic flowers, and a leaning sign and nothing else. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw in the dark when my flashlight flickered. I know how it felt when cold, damp fingers pressed against my chest without weight. I know the way 3 voices can speak as one. I know the sound of small hands tapping on a metal door at midnight. I used to take shortcuts too, you know. On my days off, I would cut through the little churchyard on Maple and 5th because it shaved 10 minutes off the walk to the store. I would stroll past the old stones without thinking, sometimes reading the names out loud just to hear how they sounded. After Fairview, after Section D, I stopped. I drive the long way now. If I'm heading somewhere and I see headstones in the distance, I turn off a street or add 10 minutes to the trip without hesitating. If a funeral is on TV in some show, I change the channel. When my cousin asked me to be a pallbearer for his father, I lied and said my back was out. I send flowers instead of showing up. I cannot stand in front of a stone and read a name anymore without feeling like something behind it is listening, waiting for me to notice the wrong detail. At night, when I am driving and I pass the turn for Fairview, I reach over and turn the radio up all the way. Music or static or some host yelling about sports, anything to fill that space where I might otherwise hear soft laughter carrying over damp grass. I keep seeing those kids in my mind, not just the way they looked out there among the stones, but the way the man at the cemetery talked about them, late for watching them, wanting someone to keep an eye on them. Sometimes, when I am trying to sleep, I hear a small voice in that thin, stretched tone say, "You are late," and my chest clenches because I know it is true. I was late that night, late to understand, late to leave, late to realize that watching is not just seeing, it is being seen. I cannot prove any of this. All I have are these shaking hands, this jacket I will not touch, and the way my feet automatically cross the street now if I even think a cemetery might be ahead, like some part of me learned something my brain will not admit. That is why I am parked here near another graveyard gate far from Fairview, engine off, phone in my hand, talking to you like a fool. Because yesterday, when I stopped at the grocery store on the other side of town, I pulled on an old hoodie from the back seat without thinking. And when I got home, my sister pointed at my shoulder and said, "When did you get that stain?" I went into the bathroom, turned my back to the mirror, and angled my phone to take a picture. There, on the gray fabric of a hoodie that has never been near Fairview, never been in that trash bag, was a small, faint, muddy handprint near the shoulder. Same size, same shape, as if someone small had stood behind me in the cereal aisle, reached up, and reminded me that just because I quit watching Section D does not mean Section D stopped watching me. The coffin bells started ringing after midnight. My name's Tyler Grant. I'm from a place called Mason Ridge, out off the 2-lane, past the feed store, the side of town people only know because of the old hillside cemetery above it, and I work nights as the guy who does whatever no one else wants to do out there, hauling trash, checking gates, sitting in the little security room when everyone else is home, in bed, and right now it is a little after 3 in the morning, and I am parked at the bottom of that hill with my engine off and my hazard lights blinking and my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and I need to get this out of my head before I drive away or before the battery gauge drops any lower, because I keep hearing that sound. Even now, with the windows up and the radio off and the rain finally stopping, I still hear it under everything. That thin little ring you only think about when you imagine being buried alive. But there are no bells on any of those graves. I checked until my fingers went numb. Today was not special when it started. That is the worst part. There was nothing strange about it. When I woke up, it was Wednesday, my one late shift in the week, so I slept in by accident until almost 10. My phone alarm had gone off at 9, but I hit it without even opening my eyes. And when I finally sat up, my neck hurt from the way I had slept, hunched over one pillow, and my first thought was that I had to stretch my hoodie another day because I have not had time to do laundry. I made instant oatmeal in the microwave, the apple cinnamon kind they sell in big boxes, and while it spun around in there, I scrolled through my notifications and saw a message from my mom asking if I was still planning to come by on Sunday to help her move some boxes in the garage. I thumbed out a quick yes and a little thumbs up and barely read what I had written because I was thinking about whether I had enough gas to make it through 2 more shifts. I ate the oatmeal standing at the counter, not even sitting down, spoon clinking against the bowl, and put my work clothes on the same way I always do, layer by layer without thinking. Black work pants with the knees starting to fade, gray long sleeve shirt, the dark green jacket with the patch over my chest that says Tyler in white thread next to a little stitched tower that is supposed to look like the Mason Ridge Cemetery chapel, and my old black cap that used to be blue but the sun took the color out of it. My boots were still a little damp from the rain the night before, but I put them on anyway, double-tied the laces, grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door and my cheap little lunchbox with a turkey sandwich and a bag of chips and a chocolate bar I should not be eating, and I checked the time as I pulled the door shut. It was 1:42 p.m. My shift starts at 3. It is a 15-minute drive up there if you hit the 2 lights on green, 20 if you get stuck. And I remember thinking I might even get to sit in my car for a while and listen to the radio before I had to clock in. That is how normal it was. Mason Ridge Cemetery sits up on a slope behind the town, the hill that everyone points to when they give directions. You go past the school, you pass the 2 gas stations, then you take the curve by the old factory, and you see the hill with all the little white stones on it. And you know you are going the right way. The front part is neat and flat and looks almost like a park. People walk their dogs around the bottom in the daytime, but if you go up the narrow road that winds to the top, there is the older part, the hillside section, where the stones lean out of the ground like broken teeth, and the ground buckles from roots and time. That is where I spend most of my nights, walking the path along the iron fence that keeps the hill from spilling down into the road, checking that nobody has climbed in from that side, nobody has left candles burning or anything like that. Because we had rain in the forecast, Mr. Caldwell, the day supervisor, asked me when I came in to keep a closer eye on the upper part tonight. He said the ground might get slick and he did not want any visitors slipping if anyone decided to come up late. The only visitors we ever get after dark are the ones who do not want to be seen by anyone in daylight. You understand, kids. Sometimes somebody's sitting in their car crying, that kind of thing. I clocked in at 2:57 according to the old punch clock on the office wall, and my phone said 2:59, which is about right. That thing always runs a couple minutes behind. Caldwell handed me the keys to the upper gate, told me they had a burial in section H at 4 and that the family was kind of particular, so I should stay clear until they left, and he reminded me again about the fog advisory. They had it on the local news that the river down below was putting off a lot of moisture and it could roll up over the ridge after midnight. He said it like a joke, like stage fog, makes the place spooky. Ty, maybe you should charge tickets. I laughed and said I would keep an eye out for any ghosts asking for autographs, just to say something. And I took the keys and the night log and walked out into the light wind. I spent the first part of the shift doing the usual small things, picking up faded flower plastic that had blown off, empty water bottles, somebody's little crumpled snack wrapper, that sort of thing. The burial went fine as far as I could tell. I stayed down by the maintenance shed while it was going on up top, rolling the mower back into its spot and coiling the hose, and when I finally drove the cart up around 5, there were still damp patches of fresh dirt under the new stone in section H, Still some tissue from the flower arrangements blowing along the grass, but the family was gone, the black cars were gone, and the only sound was the distant hum of town. I ate my sandwich around 6, inside the tiny security room that sits halfway up the hill, just off the main curve of the road. It is barely a room at all, more like a box with a desk and a small window that looks out toward the upper gate. But it has a heater and a cheap little monitor showing 3 camera angles, one on the front gates, one on the chapel door, and one on the upper path along the fence. The camera on the upper path is old, the image a little washed out, but it saves me a few trips some nights. I unwrapped my sandwich, flipped on the radio behind me low, and listened to some talk show while I chewed, hardly paying attention, marking off boxes on the night checklist one by one. There is a line on that checklist that says bell check, and it makes me sick to look at it now, but it is not what you think. It is a joke someone wrote years ago. Most of the people who work here do not even notice it anymore. Long time ago, according to Caldwell, somebody installed a museum display in the chapel about old burial practices, including the story about safety coffin bells, those little bells that used to be strung to a person's wrist and up to the surface in case they buried someone alive by accident. The display got taken down before I ever worked here, but the line stayed on the sheet, and everyone treats it like a trivia thing. No one has ever checked a real bell as long as I have worked nights. You need to remember that, because it matters later. Around 8, the sky went from gray to nearly black. The clouds pulled in tight, and a light rain started that turned into heavier drops by 9. The kind of rain that makes you tuck your chin into your jacket and walk fast without quite running. I did my usual 9 o'clock patrol anyway, rain or not. Up past the chapel, around the upper gate, along the fence line where it drops off to the road. My flashlight made a narrow tunnel in the wet air. The beam catching fat drops like beads on a string. My boots slipped once on a muddy patch, and my heart jumped, and I told myself to slow down, take care, you do not want to fall and roll down the hill like a fool. The stones up there are darker, older, they soak up the water until they look almost black. And the names on most of them are so worn you have to squint to see them. I kept my eyes mostly on the ground so I would not trip. The first bell sound, the very first, was so soft I blamed it on my imagination before it even finished ringing. I was at the far corner of the fence line, the part where it turns and runs back along the steepest part of the hill, maybe 30 yards from the upper gate, my back to the drop and my head bent down, watching where my boots landed, when I heard something that did not match the rhythm of the rain. It was not loud. It was a clean, thin note that cut through the patter, like the sound a small glass makes if you run a finger around the rim, only shorter, like a tiny bell hit once and let go. It came from somewhere down the slope to my left, where the hill drops away, steep into dark shrubs, and then the road. I stopped and turned toward it without thinking, and shined my light down into the space between the fence bars, expecting to see something obvious, like a bike with a bell on the handle, or some piece of metal junk lying on the ground. There was nothing there except wet leaves and the shine of the road beyond. Empty, no cars. The sound did not repeat immediately, and because I did not want to stand there like an idiot staring into the dark, I said out loud, half joking, that the wind must have hit something just right. Even though there was no wind, the air was heavy and still. I finished that round and came back down to the security room to dry off. My jacket was damp, but not soaked. My hair clung to the sides of my face, and as I took off my cap and shook the rain out in the tiny bathroom sink, I told myself I was just keyed up because of the forecast and the talk Caldwell had given me. People put ideas in your head, and then your brain does the rest. At about 10:30, I made a pot of cheap coffee in the old machine, even though I do not like it much, poured myself half a cup, and stood by the little window, looking out at the hill. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the security light by the chapel made a hazy cone in the mist. I could see the shapes of some of the stones, just barely, like shadows standing close together. The monitor on the wall hummed faintly, its three little gray rectangles showing static and black, and the pale outline of the front gate. I watched the upper path camera for a bit. Nothing moved. At 11, Caldwell called from home to check in, like he sometimes does on bad weather nights. I told him everything was fine, just wet, no visitors, no trouble, and he told me to stay inside more than usual, to not be a hero, his words, not mine. Then he laughed and said maybe the fog would roll in and give me a good story to tell, and I said something like, "Sure, maybe the old bells will ring," and he paused for what felt like half a second too long before chuckling again, awkward, and saying it was all myths anyway. When I hung up, the room felt smaller. At midnight, I did one more full patrol down in the newer section, just to get some air, even if the air was wet. My hood was up, my flashlight beam cutting through the drizzle, my feet splashing a little in the puddles. It was quiet in that way that makes you notice your own breathing. I walked the front gates, checked the locks, went past the chapel door, tested it, solid, and then I looked up toward the hill. That was the first time I saw the fog in a way that made my stomach tighten. It was not lying evenly over the grass, not a low sheet like you see on a field sometimes. It had formed a band halfway up the slope, a thick white strip hugging the rows of older stones and the path along the back fence. Below that, near where I stood, the air was fairly clear, just mist and drizzle, and above it, up near the chapel and the road, I could see the outline of the big cedar tree and the edge of the parking area, but that middle band looked solid, like the hill had grown a belt of cloud. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at it, and finally told myself it was just the way the warm air from town was mixing with the cold from the hill. They say that on the news all the time. Temperature inversion. I am not a scientist. I just repeated the words until they sounded dull enough to walk away from. Inside the security room again, I tried to focus on paperwork. I filled out the log, wrote down the time I had checked each gate, each section, the weather notes. The line for bell check caught my eye, and I actually smirked at it, thinking of Caldwell's tone on the phone, and I wrote a little dash next to it like I always do, because it is a joke that does not mean anything. My pen slipped when I did it because the building gave a tiny shudder, like someone had closed a heavy door somewhere, but nothing had moved. Then, right after that, something on the upper path camera changed. It was not obvious at first, just a slight brightening of the washed-out gray image, like someone had turned up the contrast. I swiveled my chair closer and squinted at the screen. The camera angle shows the back fence line running from left to right, and a little piece of the path that hugs it. Usually, you see only the light patch of gravel and the dark suggestions of stones beyond it. Now there was a pale smear along the bottom half, like milk poured in water, and as I watched, that smear thickened and climbed a little higher, covering more of the path, until the gravel strip disappeared, and the fence posts themselves were just darker lines in a soft white mess. The clock in the corner of the screen said 12:23. Something in me decided that I should go up there, that I should check that the cameras were not malfunctioning, that the fog was not hiding someone who had slipped in from the road. That is my job, right? To go and look, to walk the lines. So I grabbed my radio, clipped it on my belt, pulled my hood up, took the big flashlight this time instead of the smaller one, and stepped back out into the wet air. The drizzle had lightened even more. You would think that would make it better. It did not. Everything felt too still. The sound from the town below was thin. No dogs, no sirens, no far-off train, just the faint hiss of tires, now and then, on the main road. As I climbed the hill, my boots slipping a little on the muddy patches, I kept telling myself to log this properly later, to write down that I had gone up to check camera 3 at 12:25 because of low visibility. Like it would matter, like the right words on a page could control what was happening out there. By the time I reached the curve where the security room sits, I could see the band of fog more clearly. It came right up to the edge of the upper road, like the hill had decided to stop breathing beyond that line. The security light by the chapel on my right made the top of it glow faintly, but the inside was a flat gray. I could not see any stones at all through it, just a wall. I walked along the road until I reached the gap in the low wall where the path begins, that leads into the older section and along the back fence. That is when the second bell sound came. There was no mistaking it this time. It cut through the thick air so clean it hurt. One single sharp ring, like a small bell on a string, hit once by a gentle hand. It came from inside the fog, straight ahead, not far. My first reaction was anger. I was sure some kids had snuck up there with a little speaker or something, trying to make a video, maybe trying to scare the night guy. I stepped onto the path and the fog swallowed my legs up to the knees. It was cold and damp, heavier than just wet air, and as I moved forward, it curled around my shins with a slow drag, like wading in a shallow current. My flashlight beam hit only white for a few feet, and then nothing, just a pale brightness. I called out loud, my voice sounding small in the damp. I said that if anyone was up here, they needed to come out, that the gates were closed, and this was private property. All the phrases Caldwell drilled into us during training. The only answer was another bell ring, slightly to my left. Same pitch, same length. It did not sound closer or farther, just placed somewhere else in the white. I swung the flashlight in that direction and saw only fog, then the faint shadow of a headstone, then fog again. No wires, no hanging objects, no people. For a second, I thought maybe there was a wind chime hung up in the tree line beyond the fence, but there was no movement in the branches at all. The fog did not even stir. I took another step, then another. The gravel crunch under my boots told me I was still on the path, even when my eyes could not see it. Every few seconds, that bell would ring again. Not in any pattern I could follow, just here and there within the gray. Ahead, to the side. Once, faint, back the way I had come, which made me spin around so fast, my heel slipped off the edge of the path and my ankle rolled. I barely caught myself on the fence. The cold metal under my hand felt wet and rough, like it had been sweating. I took a breath then, holding the bar with one hand and the flashlight with the other, trying to slow my heart. I told myself it was someone's phone notification sound, or a little speaker hidden under one of the stones, something clever and stupid at the same time. And then I remembered the line on the checklist, bell check. The story Caldwell had told me the night I was hired about the old display they used to have in the chapel, the one with the replica coffin and the rope going up to a little bell above ground, and how he used to jump when kids asked if they ever really used those things here. No, he had said then, not here. That was just for show. As that story came back into my head, the bell rang again. This time, twice in quick succession, like someone tapping it gently, and my chest tightened so hard I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I decided I had gone far enough. No one was answering my calls. No shapes other than stones were moving. The fog was thickening around my thighs and starting to climb, so I did what I thought was the sensible thing. I turned to go back the way I had come, toward the road, toward the light, the way I knew for sure, and my boot hit not gravel, but the raised edge of a stone I did not remember being near. I stumbled hard, my hand letting go of the fence, my flashlight beam swinging wildly. For a second, the light landed on a headstone right in front of me, close enough that I could see the drops of water clinging to the carved letters. I did not mean to read it, but my eyes caught the name anyway. Martha Grant. Same last name as me. I froze. It is not a rare name, I know that, but I had walked this upper path so many times and I had never noticed that stone. It was an older one, the dates worn at the edges, 18-something to 19-something, barely legible, not a new grave by any stretch. But it felt like it had stepped in front of me. I told myself I was imagining things, that I had just turned more than I thought in the fog, that I had never looked closely at these names up here, because I was usually watching my feet. Still, my mouth went dry. I backed away from it carefully, found the crunch of gravel again, and followed the path by sound until my knees came out of the fog at the edge of the road. When I crossed that invisible line, the bell stopped ringing, just like that. No trailing off, no last echo. 1 second it was part of the world, the next it was not. I stood on the asphalt for a long minute, letting the rain run down my face, and looked back at the wall of white hugging the hill. My hands were shaking. I told myself to go back to the security room, to write this down, to maybe call Caldwell. Instead, I stood there feeling like a kid who had run out of a dark basement, listening for footsteps behind him. The monitors in the security room showed nothing new when I went back inside. The upper path camera was just a lighter smear now, the fog almost all the way into the lens. The clock on the wall said 12:41. My phone said 12:42. For a while, I tried to convince myself that what had happened was just me spooking myself with old stories. I even took out my phone and looked up recordings of bell sounds, trying to find one that matched so I could tell myself it was some app or some notification someone had set up, but none of them were right. Too metallic, too long, too dull. The one I had heard was clear and small and exact, like a bell made only for one job. I do not know how much time passed after that. Enough for my coffee to go cold. Enough for me to write half a line in the log and scratch it out again because it looked silly on paper. I know I was still sitting there when the radio crackled. It was a little after 1, according to the wall clock. The rain had started up again, steady, against the tiny window. I had my feet up on the empty chair across from me, my boot soles wet and leaving marks. The radio on my belt, which had been quiet all night except when Caldwell called, suddenly hissed in that way it does when someone keys up on the other end. I grabbed it, thumb already on the button, ready to say my usual, "This is Tyler, go ahead." But before I pressed it, a voice came through. Thin, a little distorted, but clear enough. It said, very soft, like someone talking through a handkerchief, "I need to come up now." That was it. No name, no call sign, nothing. Just that sentence. I recognized the tone right away. Not the voice exactly, but the way someone sounds when they are calling from the lower gate after hours and want in. A family member who got held up and does not understand why everything is locked. I repeated the phrase out loud because I thought maybe I had misheard it. I said, "You need to come up now." "Is that what you said? Who is this?" And I pressed the button like I should have done first, but the only answer was a crackle-like paper being crumpled. Then, silence. I checked the little screen. No ID. No channel change. Just our normal frequency. I told myself it was bleed from some other service. Maybe Public Works, maybe a delivery truck using a similar band. I put the radio down on the desk instead of clipping it back, because suddenly I did not want it touching me. And right then, out of nowhere, the bell rang again. This time, I heard it both outside and inside my head. I swear. It was so sudden and so close that I stood up before I knew I had moved, knocking my chair back into the wall. The sound came from the hill, muffled by the building and the rain, but still exact. One single clear ring. Then another. A few seconds later, I looked at the monitor for the upper path. The screen was almost all pale gray now, but at the bottom edge, where the path should be, there were darker little spots in the fog, shapes that could have been stones or could have been nothing. The timestamp on the camera ticked from 17 to 18. It felt wrong that the numbers kept changing like nothing was happening. I knew then, with that feeling low in my stomach, like when you miss a step in the dark, that I was going back out there. That if I did not, if I sat in that room and pretended I had not heard anything, whatever was on the other side of that bell would not just go away. So I took the bigger raincoat off the hook by the door and put it over my jacket, grabbed the flashlight again, and picked up the radio reluctantly. I told myself I would go only to the start of the path, that I would listen from there, that I would not let myself get surrounded by fog again. The second my boots hit the wet road outside, another bell sounded. It lined up almost perfectly with the closing of the office door behind me, like a response. I walked faster than I should have, splashing in the shallow streams running down toward the drain at the bottom of the hill. The fog band looked thicker now, the top of it almost level with my waist as I came up. It glowed faintly from the security light above, but the inside stayed flat gray. I stood at the beginning of the path and listened. For a moment, there was only the rain. Then, from somewhere within that white wall, the bell rang 3 times, evenly spaced. 1, 2, 3. I counted under my breath without meaning to. My hand tightened on the flashlight, the strap of the radio on my shoulder creaking as I shifted. Another part of me, the part that still cared about rules, reached for the radio and raised it. I said that whoever was out there needed to answer, needed to stop making that sound, that this was the last warning before I contacted the sheriff. My voice shook halfway through and I hated that I could hear it. There was a hiss of static from the radio when I let the button go. Then, very clearly, in a voice that sounded like mine would if I whispered into a pillow, the radio said, "I am not out." I did not press the button. The little red transmit light did not come on. The radio lay quiet in my hand, but the words had already landed. I dropped it. I could not help it. It hit the road with a dull thud, bounced once, and lay on its side, the antenna pointing toward the fog. I did not pick it up. The bell rang once more right after it hit, so close it might as well have been on the ground in front of me. Lightning did not flash. Thunder did not roll. The world did not announce anything. It just waited. I do not know what pulled me forward after that. Maybe anger again. Maybe the urge to prove that I was not afraid of my own imagination. Maybe something in the way the fog seemed to hold its place like it was daring me. I stepped onto the path. The cold wrapped my legs up to the knees. My jeans darkened instantly. The gravel crunch underfoot felt muted, like sound was being soaked up. The flashlight beam went out a few feet and then turned into a white column. I told myself to count my steps so I would know how far I had gone. I made it to 5 before the bells began in earnest. At first, they were single strikes from here and there, like before. Then they started taking turns. One in front, one a little behind, one off to the side where the fence would be. None of them louder than the others, all at the same pitch. Not a melody, not a song, but not random either. When I stopped walking to listen, they stopped. When I took a step, one would ring. When I took another, 2 would ring, one after the other. I did not like the way that felt like it was reacting to me. I called out again, this time not the official line, just the truth, that I did not like this, that I wanted whoever it was to stop, that this was not right. My voice sounded thin and flat. It did not bounce off anything. It just went forward and was eaten. I tried to back up, to go back the way I had come, and after 3 careful steps, I realized the ground under my boots had changed. The crunch was gone. My heel sank a little more than it should have, like the earth was softer. I angled the flashlight down and saw that the gravel had been replaced by grass and dirt. I had stepped off the path without feeling it. There was a stone directly in front of my toes. So close, I almost kicked it. Low, rectangular, barely sticking above the ground. The top of it had a little depression filled with water that reflected the light back at me. I had not heard myself leave the gravel. My stomach turned over. I turned slowly, trying to find the path again, expecting to see it just a step or 2 away. A strip of lighter color in the fog. There was nothing but more grass, more dark shapes of stones fading in and out a few feet away. The fence, which should have been at my right shoulder, did not appear when I swung the light that way. It was all just open, damp air. I had the thought then, sharp and clear, that the hill had straightened out while I was not looking. That the curve I knew, the way it wraps along the road, had been pressed flat like someone smoothing a wrinkle in a sheet, and I was now standing in a place that had skipped sideways. The bells rang in a cluster then, 5 or 6 quick little strikes scattered around me, and my breath stuttered in my chest. I knelt down without deciding to. It was like something pushed down on my shoulders. The stone at my feet was so worn, the name was almost gone, but I could just make out the first letter, T. I pulled my hand back before it could touch the surface. My fingertips tingled as if they had been near static. I stood up too fast, my head swimming. I called out a name then, my own, like an idiot, shouting, "Tyler, are you there?" As if I could call myself back to where I had been. The bells rang right after I said it. One from directly in front of me, one from somewhere behind my left shoulder. Still that same little clear note, but now it sounded like laughing, if a laugh could be one sound. My chest hurt, my knees wanted to fold. I decided I was done being polite. I turned in what I thought was the direction of the road, picked a point in the gray and fixed my eyes on it and started walking. I told myself I would not stop for anything until my boots hit asphalt. The bells followed. At first they kept their distance, always a few yards away. Then, as I walked, they began to close in. Not loudly, not all at once. Just enough that I could tell the sound was not coming from out among the stones anymore, but from nearer the surface of the ground at my feet. Once I swore I felt a vibration under my soles a split second before the ring. Not shaking, not like a train, just a tiny pluck in the earth. I refused to look down. I kept my gaze on that patch of fog ahead, even when shapes moved at the edges of my vision, like figures standing behind frosted glass. Occasionally, I would catch the edge of a stone, the dark trunk of a tree, and use that to adjust my path. I told myself to ignore the urge to turn my head when I thought I saw movement. I told myself that if I looked, if I gave in, the bells would have something more to play with. I cannot tell you how long that went on. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been half an hour. The fog presses on you until time gets dull. I remember the moment it broke because the change was so sudden it almost made me fall. One step I was in the white world, the next my foot hit the hard edge of the road and my other leg swung out into open air. The fog stopped at the boundary like an invisible wall. My boot landed on wet asphalt with a slap. I stepped fully out, my whole body coming clear, and behind me, the gray just wavered slightly, calm again. The bells did not fade away. They just stopped. One instant, they were part of the air. The next, there was only the patter of the rain and my own harsh breathing. I stood there on the road, water running down my nose and onto my lip, and I laughed once, too loud, because for a moment, I was just so relieved to be on something flat and solid that I could have dropped to my knees. Then I remembered the radio and realized in a little cold flash that I had not stepped over it on my way out. I had not kicked it or tripped on it. The patch of road where it had fallen was empty. I looked around in a small circle, shining the flashlight on the ground in case it had bounced farther than I thought. There was nothing. The only things on that stretch of asphalt were wet leaves and a little trickle of water running toward the storm drain. I do not have any reason for you. Radios do not get up and walk. They do not evaporate. It was there, then it was not. I wanted to go looking for it. I really did. But something in me was done. Some part of my will snapped cleanly like a twig. I turned away from the hill, from the fog, from the path, and walked down toward the lower lot. I unlocked my car with shaking hands, climbed in, slammed the door, and sat there with my forehead on the steering wheel. The hazard switch under my fingers felt like a lifeline when I hit it, and the soft tick-tick started up. It was the only sound I wanted to hear. I did not turn the engine on right away. I needed silence from outside. For a minute or two, nothing happened. Just the rain on the windshield, the flash of the hazards on the gate in front of me. Then, faintly, through the glass and the roof and all that distance, I heard it again. One single clear bell ring from up the hill. Not from the road, not from the lower grounds, from the band of fog. It was not loud. It did not echo. It did not need to. My whole body reacted. My fingers tightened on the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. I swallowed and my throat clicked. I told myself it was memory, just my mind replaying the sound. I wanted to believe that. I turned the key. The engine coughed and then caught, shaky, like it had slept too hard. The dash lights came on, all the little icons blinking to life. The clock on the radio said 3:02 a.m. I know what time it was when I went out the first time. I know how long my rounds usually take. I know that I did not spend almost 3 hours up in that fog. My legs are not that tired. My clothes are not that wet. The numbers did not care. 3:02. I put the car in reverse with hands that did not feel quite attached to me, backed up, turned around in the narrow lot, stopped facing the gate. I sat there a second longer, listening. No bells, no radio, just the engine and the metronome of the hazard lights. Before I pulled out, I glanced up at the rearview mirror, back toward the hill. The uppermost lights were just barely visible through the rain, a soft glow against the sky. In front of that glow, for half a second, I thought I saw small, darker shapes moving along the ridge, like people walking in a line. Not detailed, not close, just a row of little interruptions in the light. Then the hazard blink came, the reflection flashed, and when my eyes adjusted again, there was nothing but trees. I am not going back up there to check. I am not finishing the shift. I left the log half filled on the desk. I left the keys hanging on the hook. I left the radio wherever it went. Maybe Caldwell will call me in the morning asking why the upper camera is still out. Maybe he will write me up. Maybe I will not have that job anymore. I do not care. I cannot put my boots back on that gravel and pretend all I have to worry about are kids with spray paint. I know now that there is something else up there. Something in that blank part of the hill where the fog likes to sit, and whether it is just sound and air playing tricks, or something using sound and air to poke at us, does not matter. It knows my name now. It knows my voice well enough to borrow it. It knows my last name well enough to put it in front of me on a stone I never noticed before. I already changed the route I take home. The quickest way drops you down past the old churchyard on Valley Street. I am not doing that. I pulled up my maps as soon as the gate was behind me and found a route that loops wide through the industrial park instead, even though it adds 15 minutes and takes me past the railroad tracks. I would rather sit waiting for a freight train at 3:30 in the morning than stop at a red light with headstones on either side of me. I thought about my mom's message earlier about Sunday and the boxes in the garage. She always asks, when we talk, if I have gone up to visit my grandfather's grave lately, the one in the little cemetery by the lake on the other side of town. I usually say no and promise that I will soon. Now, I know I am lying when I say that. I will not. I cannot step between rows of stones on purpose anymore. I do not care who is under them. I can send my respects from the road. I can say hello out loud when I drive by and stare straight ahead at the yellow lines until I am past. I had to pass one small burial ground on my way here tonight before all this started, and I did not think twice. That will not happen again. I turned off the radio in the car while I have been talking because a song came on with a little triangle ding at the start, and my whole body jerked like someone had slapped me. Every sound that has that pitch now feels like a hook. I know later, when the house is quiet and I am lying in bed, if I ever make it to bed, if I do not sit here until the sun comes up, I am going to hear that bell every time the fridge motor kicks on or the pipes in the wall knock. That is what I mean when I say I am changed. Not that I saw a figure or a face or some old story come to life. I did not. That would almost have been easier. There is nothing to describe for you to picture except gray and wet, and the feeling of being somewhere you should not be, while something you cannot see steps a little closer each time you move. The fear is not in some big moment. It is in the little holes in the night where no sound should live, and something decides to put a bell there. You can think what you want about me, that I am tired, that I let stories get to me, that it was the weather, that it was some stupid prank I will hear about later from kids posting videos of the night guard freaking out in the fog. Maybe you are right. Maybe when the sun comes up and I drive past the hill and see only grass and stone, I will tell myself that too. But even if it is all in my head, the effect is the same. I will not be the one to walk between graves in the dark anymore. I will not park by a fence line and roll the window down. I will not let my hand rest on the top of a stone while I talk to the dirt under it. I am staying on concrete and asphalt as much as I can. And if I ever hear that sound again when I am not within sight of a cemetery, if a little clear bell note cuts through my day from nowhere, I am walking the other way without looking back. Because tonight, up on that hill, in that fog, it felt like the bells were not telling me someone under the ground needed help. It felt like they were letting me know they were already helping themselves, that they could reach right up into the part of the world where I was and move things around just enough to make me doubt my own feet and my own clock and my own name. That is why I am talking to you. Instead of finishing my shift, instead of writing a neat little line in a log that says, "Weather foggy, patrol complete," I need someone else to hold this story for a while so I do not have to. Someone to hear that there were no bells installed on any of those graves, that there is no display in the chapel anymore, no rope, no hardware, no reason for that sound to exist at all up there. If there is any mercy in this, it is that for now, sitting in this car with my hazard lights ticking and the gate still in front of me instead of in the mirror, I cannot hear them. Not yet. I am going to turn the key again in a minute and put it in drive and roll out onto the road and pick the longest, flattest route home. And if, as I pull away, something on the hill behind me decides to ring one last time to say it knows I am leaving and it knows I am still here, I am not going to look up in the mirror to check. The grave that changed its own map. My name's Caleb Morton. I'm from a place called West Ridley, out off State Route 12, where the town kind of runs out at the chain link fence. And after that, it is just the county potter's field and the old landfill, and I work as a grounds operator for the county burial services, driving the backhoe and setting the markers, and doing the stuff nobody wants to think about. And I am sitting in my truck right now with the engine off down by the main gate, watching my breath fog in the cab, even though all the windows are up. And I can see the numbered stakes up on the hill if I lean just right. And I am not going back up there. Man, I am done. I am telling you this because I need it out of my head before it rearranges itself again, because that is what it feels like. Like my own memory is one of those little white stakes that keeps ending up somewhere else. So if I jump around, I am sorry. I am going to try to start normal the way the day started, before the rows stopped staying where they were supposed to be, before the ground started arguing with the map. All right, so it was Tuesday. I know that because we always do the indigent burials on Tuesdays and Fridays. The county blocks them like that for paperwork. And I remember waking up late because my phone alarm did not go off, or I thought it did not, but when I checked later, it said I had turned it off, and I have no memory of that. Anyway, I woke up to light already coming through the blind, striping the wall, and the first thing in my head was that I had forgotten something. That heavy feeling like you told someone you would do a thing and never wrote it down. I checked the clock on the stove. It said 10:23 a.m. and I had to be at the yard by 11 to pull the backhoe and trailer out. So I did that fast morning where you do not taste anything. Just shove half a peanut butter sandwich in your mouth and wash it down with cold coffee from the night before. I remember the peanut butter because a little bit got on the front of my work shirt and I wiped it with my thumb and it left a darker streak. And I thought, whatever, nobody out there cares how I look. And I pulled on the county shirt, the dark green one with the seal stitched on, and my name patch, Caleb, in white thread. and the gray pants with the stain on the left leg from hydraulic fluid, and my steel toe boots. And I grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair, the one with the rip in the cuff, checked my wallet and keys, because I always think I have lost one or the other, and headed out. My truck started on the first try for once. No sputter, which should have been a good sign, but all it did was make me notice how quiet the street was. No kids, no leaf blowers, just my engine, and the sound of one dog somewhere barking like it could see something I could not. I hit the light on Elm on a green, turned out toward the county yard, past the strip of car lots and the empty building that used to be the bowling alley. And I remember thinking it looked wrong without cars in front of it, like a mouth with the teeth gone, nothing supernatural, just wrong in the way time makes everything look. If you stick around long enough, I pulled into the yard at 10:51. The clock over the gate always runs 5 minutes fast, so I do not count it. And my boss, Raul, was already by the trailer checking the tire, chewing on a toothpick. He wears the same ball cap every day, dark blue, brim fraying, county services stitched on it, and he raised a hand when he saw me and said, "You cut that one close? Man, we got a tight schedule, 4 plots to open, and one of them is a double." And I said, "Sorry, alarm messed up." And he said, "You and that alarm?" And then he just shrugged, because Raul is like that. He acts like nothing surprises him anymore. And mostly, he is right. We see a lot of quiet, sad stuff out there. No big scenes, just county vans. A pastor sometimes, a clerk with a clipboard, and the hill, always the hill. I hooked the trailer, checked the chains, did the walk around, kicked the tires like that actually tells you anything. And we rolled out. Him in the lead truck with the trailer of vaults, me behind with the backhoe, my radio clipped to the dash, hissing low static on channel 2. We took the south road, because the north lane is full of potholes from the winter. And as we drove out past the last of the houses, the land started to dip and then rise again where the old landfill was capped. And the cemetery is on the far side of that, where the county decided land was too cheap to waste. Potter's Field is not like the nice cemeteries with big trees and statues. It is just a sloping hill with rows and rows of numbered stakes. White paint with black stenciled numbers. 001 all the way up into the 800 seconds now. And every block of numbers on the map is a section, and every section has a letter, and I have that whole grid in my head from doing this job 3 years. I could draw it for you with my eyes closed. Where the gravel lane cuts through, where the little shed is at the bottom for the tent and the chairs, where the old chain link fence bows out, where someone backed into it before my time. None of that ever changed. That is the point. It was the one place in my life that stayed the same day to day, and then it did not. We pulled in through the side gate. Raul hopped out, walked up to the metal sign with Potter's Field regulations on it, the one everybody ignores because hardly anybody comes out here unless they have to, and he checked the laminated sheet on the back of it with the day's schedule clipped on. 4 names, all with the same basic info: age, case number, section, and grave number, something like Section D, Row 7, Plot 12, cremains. And he called out, "All right, first one is D, 712. We will knock that out, then go grab lunch before the second van." And I nodded and swung the backhoe off the trailer, the engine rumbling under me, and I drove it up the lane, the tires crunching the gravel, and I did not need the map for that one. I knew where Section D was, left side of the hill, middle third. The ground there always feels a little softer from old drainage. I lined up where D7 should be, counted the stakes, each one maybe 4 feet apart, 68, 69, 70, and my brain did that thing where it stumbles and then pretends it did not, because the stakes did not match the numbers I knew should be there. They read 14, 15, 16, like they had slid in from somewhere else, and I actually laughed. I remember that I called on the radio, "Hey, Raul, did someone move the stakes in D? Because this looks like section B numbers. And he came up in the truck, gravel popping under his tires, and he got out, hands on his hips, squinting, and he said, "The stakes do not move." Man, that is the whole point of stakes. And I said, "I know, but look, this is D section." "Yeah," and he nodded, pointing to the faded little wooden sign on the fence that said D in white paint, and I pointed to the numbers, and he frowned and bent down and wiped some dirt off one with his thumb, just like I had wiped the peanut butter off my shirt, and he said, 14, 15, 16, his voice flat, and I waited for him to say, "Yeah, that is wrong, let us grab the map." But instead he just looked up at me and said, "You sure you are not turned around?" And that annoyed me a little, because I know this place, but I kept my voice calm. I said, "Raul, you know and I know, D7 is up from the lane, facing the road," and he stared at the slope like he was trying to see it fresh. And then he said, "Hang on," and walked back down to the truck, came back with the clipboard map, the one we mark every grave on with a little X, and he laid it on the hood and traced his finger along. And the lines all showed what I remembered. D7 is this line here. And he tapped exactly where we were standing. And the numbers printed under it were 70, 71, 72. But when we looked up at the stakes again, they still said 14, 15, 16. And he scratched the back of his neck and laughed in that way people do when they do not like what they are seeing. And he said, "All right, maybe some idiot from Parks moved them around as a joke. Go grab 70 from the shed, and we will reset them after. For now, just pace from the corner and dig where the map says." And I should have argued with that. I should have said, why would anybody come all the way out here to swap stakes, and when and how? But I was still trying to keep the day normal in my head, so I counted off from the fence post, 1, 2, 3, and put the bucket down where 70 should have been, and the ground gave under it. In that way, it does when you hit sand, not rock. And the job took over. Measurements, depth, checking the sides for slump, the muscle memory of it, and for a while I forgot about the numbers. It was just dirt and sweat and the smell of old landfill breath under the topsoil. We finished that plot. Raul checked the depth, nodded, and went back down to meet the first van while I smoothed the edges, and the service went, like they usually do out here, quick. A pastor with a voice that always sounds tired, reading from his book, one county worker to sign the paper, me standing off to the side with my hands folded, trying not to look at the box, trying not to think about how small some of them are. When they drove off again, Raul came back up, flipped a stake in his hand, said, "We will deal with these numbers tomorrow, not our problem today." And I wanted to insist, because it felt like the kind of thing that grows if you leave it, but the schedule was tight. We had to move to the next section, F3 on the far side, and the day kept pushing us forward. The second and third burials went smooth, or as smooth as that kind of thing ever gets. No more weird numbers, no more map arguments, and for a while I convinced myself it had just been one bad row, maybe mispainted last season. I told myself I would come back with a can of spray and fix them in the afternoon. And then lunch ran long. And then the sky changed. I remember that. We were sitting in the truck eating fast food. Raul grabbed from the drive-thru in town lukewarm fries and a burger that tasted like salt and nothing else. And the light outside went from regular gray to that sickly yellow gray you get before a storm, and the wind picked up out of nowhere, ballooning the paper bag on the dash before tipping it over, fries scattering. And Raul glanced at his watch and said, "Last one is at 4. If that van is late, we are going to be fighting mud." And of course it was late. Of course, the last one always is. So by the time we lined up for the final burial, the first drops were already hitting the windshield. Fat and spaced out, the way a storm clears its throat, and the clerk called on the radio from the road, saying they were stuck behind a wreck, they would be at least 40 minutes. And Raul sighed and said, "All right, we will open the plot now before it turns into soup. F10, you know where that is?" And I said, "Yeah," and started the backhoe, the wipers squeaking on the glass. I headed up the right side lane, gravel now darkening with the rain, and turned in where F10 lives in my bones, top third of the hill, right of the access road, close enough to the fence you can hear the traffic on 12 if the wind is right. And as I came up out of the dip, I got that same stumbling feeling I had in D7, like stepping for a stair that is not there, because the row at the top of F was facing the wrong way. I stopped the machine and just stared for a second. The stakes were all there, 201, 202, 203, in order, but they were tilted in a direction they do not tilt, the numbers facing down toward the creek instead of toward the road, like someone had turned the whole row overnight, and the ground looked wrong too. Not disturbed exactly, but the grass pattern was off, longer in patches where it should have been even, and the lane that should have run straight between F and G had a little dog leg in it now. A crooked jog that I knew was not there yesterday because I had driven it 3 times. I shut the backhoe off so I could hear, and I sat there on the seat with the rain ticking on the roof and the engine cooling, and there was this weird silence under the storm. No birds, no trucks on 12, just the sound of my own breath and the rain. And I had that feeling you get when you walk into a room and something is out of place, but you cannot see it yet. And you stand there, turning slowly until your eye finally catches the one chair that moved. This was like that, but bigger, like the whole hill had shifted a notch to the left when we were at lunch. I got on the radio and said, "Raul, F looks wrong. Did they do some grading out here you did not tell me about?" And there was a long pause, too long for just a thumb off the button, and then his voice came through, sounding smaller with the static, saying, "It has been the same all week. Man, just dig where the map says." I looked down at the printed grid, clipped to the side of the backhoe, F10 marked right where my front tire sat, and my mouth went dry, because I knew he was lying, not in the sense that he was trying to trick me, but in the sense that he had decided to go along with whatever this was, decided to call it normal so it would not become something he had to deal with. And I did not want to be that guy. But I also did not want to lose my mind up there alone arguing with stakes and grass in a storm. So I did what he said. I lined up with where F10 was on the paper, ignoring that the stakes seemed to be arguing about it, and I dug. The soil coming up dark and heavy, sticking to the bucket, the smell of wet clay and old trash from the landfill days, rising thick, and the whole time I had this sensation that if I looked away from the hole for too long, it would not be where I left it. That if I climbed down and walked to the truck and came back, the grave would have moved 3 feet to the right. It did not. Not then, but the thought stayed, like an itch at the base of my skull. The van finally showed. We set the vault, did the service in the rain, everyone under the little blue tent that snapped in the wind, the pastor reading louder to be heard over the thunder, the clerk shivering under her county-issued raincoat, and when they left, Raul waved me down and said, "Finish up alone? I have to go back to the yard and sign off on some forms. You can close and tamp. You know the drill." I did not want to be left up there by myself with the weather and the numbers and the wrongness. But again, schedule, chain of command, all that. So I just nodded, told myself it was almost done, and watched his taillights disappear down the hill. And then it was just me and the row and the machine and the rain. I filled the grave back in, tamped it as best I could with the mud, put the temporary marker at the head, the little aluminum plate with the printed name slid into it. And that is when I noticed the letters were not the ones on the burial sheet. The plate said Marvin Ellis, 1959, 2025. But the schedule I had clipped to the backhoe said unknown male, case 24 to 903. And I stood there in the rain with the plate in my hand, water running down my sleeves, and checked the other 3 we had done, just to be sure I was not mixing them up, but the others matched. The names and dates lined up with the paperwork, only this one had a real name and a span of years, like someone who had people who knew him, and my heart started beating faster because I knew that name, not well, but enough. There is a guy who comes into the parts store in town, older, wears a faded army jacket and buys filters for his truck, always pays in cash, and his name is on his jacket, Ellis. And the clerk told me once, that is Marvin. He lives in the trailer court out by the old mill, and he is very much alive. As of last Thursday, when I saw him buying oil, I remember the way he said, "How you doing?" in that slow way people do when they are just being polite, and now his name was on a plate in my hand for a grave in the potter's field. I thought maybe it was a mix-up at the printer. Maybe someone grabbed the wrong plate from the pile, so I took a picture of it with my phone to show Raul, and the camera app froze for a second, like it did not want to save it, then blinked out, and when I opened the photo roll, there was nothing new, like I had never taken it. My hands were shaking enough that I almost dropped the plate. I slid it back into the holder and stuck it in the earth, because leaving the grave unmarked felt worse somehow. And I said out loud, "All right, Marvin, whoever you are, I will get this fixed." The sound of my own voice got swallowed by the wind, faster than it should have, like the air was thicker than normal. I finished up, parked the backhoe by the shed, locked it, checked the padlock twice, habit, and then went back down the hill to the gate to wait for Raul. The rain eased up, that after-storm feeling where the world is too bright, wet surfaces reflecting more sky than they should. He pulled in about 20 minutes later, asked how it went, and I told him about the marker, about the name that should not be there, and he just looked at me for a long second, toothpick still in the corner of his mouth, and finally said, "The county printer uses whatever blanks they have. Maybe they reused an old plate. Calm down, we will swap it tomorrow." And I wanted to say, "But I know that man, he is not dead." But the way Raul was looking at me, like he was daring me to push it, made me swallow it. He does not like drama. He likes problems he can fix with a wrench or a work order, not this. So I just nodded, went home, told myself I was tired and seeing connections that were not there. I slept bad that night, kept dreaming I was walking between rows of stakes, and every time I turned, the numbers were different. Not just shuffled, but wrong in ways that felt personal, dates that matched birthdays I knew, numbers that were addresses from when I was a kid. I woke up twice with my heart racing, the glowing digits of the clock saying 3:17 a.m. both times exactly, which does not seem possible, but that is what it said. The next day was supposed to be light duty, just maintenance, straightening stakes, cutting down some of the grass. But when I got to the yard, Raul met me by the coffee pot and said, "Change of plans? The director wants you up at the field for night watch." We have had some complaints about kids going through there after dark, knocking markers over, and he slapped a key into my hand, one I had never seen before, older, brass, with PF stamped in it, and said, "This is for the little office up by the gate. There is a cot if you want to lie down between rounds. Just be there from 6 to 6. Call the sheriff if you see anybody." And I said, "I did not sign up for night security." And he said, "Everybody rotates, you know that," which I did. I had just never been picked before. I almost said no, almost told him straight that I did not want to be up there after what happened. But it sounds weak when you say it out loud. Man, it sounds like you are scared of dirt and sticks, and I did not want to be that guy. So I said, fine, and spent the day doing small repairs, trying not to think about the hill, about F10 and the wrong plate. At 5:30, I drove my own truck out there. Since there was no county vehicle assigned, the sun was already low, the sky clear in that hard way it gets in winter, the kind that makes the air feel thin. I unlocked the small cinder block office by the gate with the PF key, flipped the light, a bare bulb buzzing to life. Inside there was a metal desk, a folding chair, a file cabinet, and the promised cot rolled up against the wall, and on the desk was a thick binder. The potter's field map, same as the one we use in the yard but older, pages yellowed and full of tiny handwriting, notes about who went where, and there was a big wall map pinned up too. The whole hill drawn out in blocks, each section a grid of boxes, every box with a number. I stared at that for a long minute, tracing the lanes with my eyes, the way they were supposed to be, straight and even, no dog legs, no drifting rows, and I felt this stupid wave of relief, like seeing an old friend, like, see, it is all in your head. The map is solid, the ground is solid. You just had one bad day. I poured myself some coffee from the thermos I brought, burned my tongue again because I never learn, and checked my phone. 5:58 p.m. I logged the time on the sheet on the desk, called in 18, and stepped back outside to do the first round before it got fully dark. The sky over the landfill was streaked purple and orange, pretty in a way that did not fit this place. I walked up the lane with a flashlight in one hand, even though I did not need it yet. The other hand in my jacket pocket, fingers wrapped around the radio, and as I walked, I counted the stakes out of habit, trying to calm myself. 787, 181, 782. And they matched the map in my head, rows where they should be, numbers in the right order. I breathed a little easier. The ground felt solid under my boots, no strange soft spots, no wrong tilts. I made the full loop, came back down, wrote 1820, perimeter clear, no activity, and sat for a while listening to the quiet. It is different at night out here. The town noise fades, and you hear the wind when it moves over the tops of the stakes. A kind of low hiss, and sometimes you think you hear voices. But it is just the road. That is what I told myself. It is just the road and the wind and your own blood in your ears. Around 8, I went out again, this time with the flashlight beam cutting ahead in a solid bar, breath clouding in it, and halfway up the hill, I knew something was off before I could say what, like walking into that room again. I swung the beam left and right, and it hit the stake for 780, then 781, then 790. Like there was a gap, the numbers skipping without missing stakes. There were still the same amount of white posts in the ground, but the count jumped. 787 was where 783 should be. The sequence broken and then picking up again as if that had always been the order. My skin crawled. I thought maybe I had miscounted. Maybe the light was playing tricks. So I went back down to 770 and read every single one out loud, touching each with my boot. 770, 771, 772. And when I came to the place that had been 780 earlier, the stake said 784 inches. Fresh looking black paint. No drips, no sign of tampering. And I remembered exactly the shape of the 8 I had seen at 6, the way the bottom loop had a little flick where the stencil did not sit right, and now the 4 had that same flick, like the number had changed but the hand painting it had not. I backed away, pulse loud in my head, and for some reason, what scared me most in that moment was the idea of going back to the office and seeing if the wall map had changed too. I did not want to see the paper arguing with me as well. I stood there on the slope, flashlight shaking in my hand, and from somewhere behind me on the hill, I heard a small, sharp sound, like wood shifting, like one of the stakes had been pushed deeper into the ground. I swung the light around, but all I saw were rows and rows of white in the dark, leaning just slightly toward me, like they were on a slow hinge. I called out, "Anybody out here? County security? Please move toward the gate," and my voice sounded thin, swallowed up by the open air. No answer, no footsteps, just that soft hiss of the wind over plastic flowers tied here and there to the fence. I made myself finish the loop faster this time, not reading numbers anymore, just making sure there were no actual people. And when I got back down, I shut the office door and locked it and leaned my back against it for a second, my heart still going too fast. I forced myself to look at the wall map, and for a second I thought I was safe. The lines all where they should be, F where F belongs, D where D belongs, but then my eye snagged on the corner where the key was, the little box that says what shading pattern means, and there was a new note there in handwriting I did not recognize. No date, no initials, just do not trust row numbers after dark. And the ink was still dark, like it had been written recently, and I know that note was not there at 6. I know because I had looked at that corner when I first came in, tracing the legend without really needing it, and it had been clean, no extra writing. My throat went dry. I flipped open the binder map on the desk, the section for 700 seconds, and half the grid was smudged like someone had pressed their thumb over several boxes while the ink was wet, leaving blank spaces where numbers used to be. There were indentations in the paper, marks from a pen that had pressed down and then been erased or lifted, and if I tilted the page, I could just make out the ghosts of symbols that looked like little diagonal slashes, not X's, something else, repeated in a pattern. I snapped it shut, suddenly angry because fear and anger sit close together, and I said out loud, "This is stupid. These are just boards and paint. This is some old caretaker's idea of a joke or a code." And I grabbed the radio to call Raul, thumb hovering over the button, and then I put it down because what was I going to say? The map is changing on its own, the numbers are wrong, and also there is a note on the wall telling me not to trust the rows. He would tell me to go home and sleep, and then I would have to live with being the guy who could not hack one night watch. So I stayed. I sat at the desk, pretended to read an old magazine someone left, and every few minutes I would look up at the wall map to see if anything had moved, and each time it looked the same, until around 11, when the bulb flickered and my eyes were already tired. I glanced up, and the whole section F was shaded darker than it had been, like someone had taken a pencil and gone over it, and there was a small dot drawn in one square near the top, a dot with a circle around it, and written in tiny letters next to it were the words, "Stay away." The pencil lines so faint I had to squint to see them. I stared at that for a long time, the wind rattling the little metal vent in the wall, and I realized my hand was on the PF key in my pocket, squeezing it so hard it hurt, like that would anchor me. Around midnight, I decided I could not sit in that room anymore. The walls felt like they were inching closer. So I forced myself back out into the cold, telling myself I would do one more round and then lie down on the cot until dawn. The air had that clean bite after a storm, my breath coming out in puffs, the sky clear and full of stars, the kind you never see in town. The hill looked different under starlight, flatter in some places, deeper in others, the stakes pale against the dark. I walked up the lane, the gravel crunching, and I did not even pretend to count this time. I just wanted to see if there were any kids, any signs of life that were not in my head. Halfway up, my flashlight caught something shining in the grass, not far from where F10 should be. I walked over, beam steady on it, and saw a metal plate lying face up on the ground, half sunk into the wet dirt. I bent and picked it up, wiped the mud with my thumb, and my stomach dropped. It was the marker plate for Marvin Ellis again, same name, same dates, only I knew I had left it on the grave earlier, pushed into the soil above the vault, and when I turned slowly toward where that grave should be, the head of the row was bare, no plate, just raw dirt and a slight depression, like it had never been placed. My throat closed. I turned the plate over, expecting maybe a different name on the back, some explanation, but it was blank, just cold metal in my palm. And while I stood there, the ground under my feet felt like it shifted, a small settling, and I nearly lost my balance. I actually reached out and touched the nearest stake to steady myself, the wood damp and rough under my glove, and when I looked at its number, it said 000, which is not a number we use anywhere on that hill. There is no plot 0, there never has been. I let go like it was hot, stumbled back, and my flashlight beam swung wide, catching more stakes with 000 on them. Every one within the circle of light, a ring of zeros around me, and I swear to God, I had walked this exact patch of ground earlier and seen regular numbers, 205, 206, the standard sequence. But now everything near me was blanked out, like the hill was saying, this part does not count, this part is not on the map anymore. My heart was hammering so loud, I could not hear the wind. I wanted to run straight down the slope to the truck, but some part of me was sure that if I moved too fast, the ground would tilt and send me somewhere I did not understand, so I backed up slowly, one step at a time, keeping the zeros in sight as long as I could until I hit the gravel lane, and when I glanced back up, they were gone, just regular numbers again, 210, 211, 212, nice and tidy. I almost cried from the whiplash of it, from the way the world kept flipping between what it was supposed to be and what it wanted to be when my back was turned. And that is when I heard the radio crackle on my belt. Even though I had not touched it, a burst of static that made me jump, and then a voice came through, thin and distant, saying, my name, not Caleb, but my last name, Morton, the way they say it at the yard, and it was Raoul's voice. I would have bet anything on it. Only there was an echo under it, like he was talking in a big empty room. And he said, you are in the wrong place, man, get back on the line. And I grabbed the radio, thumb on the button, and said, I know, the numbers are wrong. Have you been messing with the map? And there was a long hiss. Then the same voice said, we never moved anything. The hill moves itself. And then another crackle, and the channel went dead. I called his cell from my phone right then, standing in the lane with my breath puffing in little clouds. And he picked up on the second ring, sounding sleepy and irritated, saying, what do you want, Caleb? It is midnight. And I said, did you just call me on the radio? Did you say something about the hill moving itself? And he was quiet for a second and then said, you are on nights. You know I am off the clock now. My radio is in the locker. Stop messing around. And I could hear his television in the background, some game show, people clapping, and for a second, the world tilted again, like I was standing between two versions of the same conversation, one that had already happened and one that never did. I apologized and hung up, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. And that is when I noticed the time on the screen, 3:17 a.m., even though I knew it had been just after midnight when I stepped out of the office. I know because I checked the wall clock and it had said 12:03, and I had written it down on the log sheet, and now my phone was telling me I had lost 3 hours on a 10-minute walk. I walked back down to the office in a daze, every step weirdly light, like I could slide off the world if I did not pay attention. Inside, the log sheet on the desk had my handwriting. Sure enough, 03, perimeter check, no activity, and below it, in the same handwriting, only I do not remember writing it, another line, 3:17, wrong grave, wrong man, wrong map. The words sloping downhill, ink a little smeared like I had been pressing too hard. I touched the wet spot with my finger and it came away dry, like it had been there for a while, and above the desk, the wall map had changed again. The dot that had been in section F was gone, and instead there was a tiny circle drawn around a box at the very bottom edge of the grid, down by the fence. A place we have not used yet because the county wants to keep some land in reserve. That area is just scrubby, grass, and rocks. and in the margin next to it, in that same small handwriting, someone had written, "This is where you are." And my stomach lurched because I knew I was physically standing in the office by the gate, not at the bottom of the hill, but the map was insisting I was already somewhere else, like it knew a version of me I had not met yet. I do not know how long I stood there, trying to make the lines and the reality match, my eyes burning, the bulb overhead buzzing. At some point, I heard a soft thump against the wall outside, like someone leaning on it, and the vent rattled once, twice. I did not go look. I could not. My legs would not move. I just stared at that circle on the map until my vision blurred. And in that blur, the whole grid seemed to shift. The blocks sliding in and out of each other like tiles, then snapping back. I blinked hard and it was normal again. Or what passes for normal up there. I must have sat down on the cot at some point because the next thing I remember is waking up to gray light leaking under the door. My neck stiff, my boots still on, and the radio crackling with the morning dispatcher asking if I was still up there. I stumbled to the door, opened it, and the hill looked just like it always does in the daytime. Rows neat, numbers in order, a thin mist hanging over the low spots, no zeros, no wrong-facing stakes, just the potter's field, plain and ugly and steady. And for half a second, I thought I had dreamed the whole night, some long anxiety fit, until I felt something dig into my palm when I went to rub my eyes. I opened my hand, and there was the plate for Marvin Ellis. The edges cold against my skin, like I had been holding it the whole time. I looked up toward F10 on reflex, and from where I stood, I could see a marker plate glinting on the new grave. Too far to read the name, but there, in place, like nothing had ever moved. I did not walk up to check it. I could not. I just stood at the gate until Raoul's truck pulled in. He jumped out, asked how the night was. I said, "Quiet, nothing to report," my voice sounding wrong in my own ears, and he nodded, clapped me on the shoulder, went to the office to sign me out. I watched him look at the wall map through the open door, just a glance, nothing lingering, and I fought the urge to run in and rip it down, to grab the binder and throw it in the trash. Instead, I put the Marvin plate in my jacket pocket and left. I have tried to take it back twice since then, to slide it into the right place, but every time I drive up the road and the hill comes into view, I get this feeling in my chest like when you miss a step in the dark, and I keep going. I drive past the turnoff and tell myself I will do it another day. I checked the obituaries in the paper for a week. No Marvin Ellis. I saw him at the parts store again on Thursday. Alive, complaining about his truck, his name patch crooked on his jacket, and I could not make myself look him in the eye, because somewhere on that hill there is a piece of metal with his full name and a pair of dates that ends this year, and the ground up there is too eager to match things, to rearrange itself to fit. I know how this sounds. I know it makes me sound like I should not be trusted with a key, let alone a backhoe, but I cannot get past this. Man, I cannot unsee the way those stakes showed zeros when I was standing in the wrong spot. I cannot unknow that the map in that office has notes on it that nobody remembers writing. I asked one of the older guys about it, one who has been with the county 20 years, asked him if he had ever had the numbers not match, the rows not line up, and he just looked over my shoulder at nothing for a long second and then said, "Numbers are for the living, kid. The hill knows who is there," and then he changed the subject, would not say more. So this is where I am at now. I have not quit yet because I do not know what else I would do. This is the only steady job I have had in a long time, but I do everything I can to stay on daytime duty. I trade nights. I volunteer for the worst weather as long as there is sun. I tell Raoul my eyes are getting bad in the dark, whatever it takes, and when I have to go up there, I keep my head down. I do not count the stakes. I do not look at the map in the office any longer than I have to. And if someone asks me to reset a row marker after hours, I say, the truck is in the shop. I make something up because I know now. Once you notice that the rows are not as fixed as you thought, once you see the hill arguing with its own record, it does not stop. The world does not go back to being neat and gridded, and you realize how many places in your life depend on lines on a page agreeing with dirt on the ground, and how easy it is for one to stop matching the other. I carry that plate in my pocket most days. My fingers find it without thinking. Smooth edges, gone a little warm from my hand. I tell myself I am keeping it from going where it wants to go, from settling into whatever slot the hill has picked out for it. But deep down, I know that is not how this works. The map already has its ideas, and I am just one name away from being on it in a way I cannot erase. So I am telling you this now, parked by the gate with the truck off and the sky just starting to lighten in the east, because I need someone else to understand why I will not go up there after dark anymore, why I will cross the street if I see a row of simple white markers on a hill, why I cannot look at a grave map on a wall without feeling my stomach twist. It is not just grief or sadness. It is knowing that sometimes the ground is not where you left it. Sometimes the places we use to keep track of the dead start keeping track of us instead. And once you notice that, you spend the rest of your life checking the numbers on every little stake you pass, hoping they still say what they said yesterday, hoping to never see a zero where your name should be.